Resuming the Monday, November 19, 2018 Board of Selectmen's meeting, having just returned from executive session. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Going to move skipping ahead to number 7, which is to approve the 2018 annual license renewals. Mr. Jones?
I would move for all alcohol restaurant, 4170, Bear and Boots, British Beer Company, Bucatino Restaurant, Sea Salt, Casa Vallarta, Celestina's Restaurant, DJ's Famous Wings, Falmouth Country Club, Josh's at Davisville, Liam McGuire's, the New Peking Palace, Osteria La Civetta, Paul's Pizza, Pickle Jar Kitchen, Quarterdeck Restaurant, Quick Soul Tavern, Simply Divine Pizza, TGC at Saconesset, the Flying Bridge, the Golden Swan, and Water Street Kitchen.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye. For the AA clubs, the Falmouth Yacht Club, Cape Cod Curling Club, Falmouth Lodge number 2380, Falmouth Rod and Gun, Midway Trap and Skeet, and Woods Hole Golf Club.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye. The AA Inn holder, well, there's all alcohol, Seacrest Beach Hotel and Coonamessett Inn.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Inn holder, wine, malt, and cordials, Palmer House Inn.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All alcohol package store, Falmouth Food, Mart and Liquor, Falmouth Wine and Spirits, John's Liquors, Cappy's, North Falmouth Liquors, RJ's Variety and Liquor, T-Ticket Market.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
The Wine and Malt Club, St. Anthony's.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
A Wine and Malt Restaurant, Bangkok Thai Cuisine, Crab Apples, Crepe Cod, Homeport Sushi, Martha's Eats, New Golden Dynasty, Pizza One and Subs, Seafood Sam's, Steve's Pizzeria, and more.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Wine Mart Cordial Restaurant, Country Fair.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Wine and Malt Package, Holly Park Variety, Intergas, Jack and the Beanstalk, Wild Harbor General Store.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Brewery, Aquatic Brewing, and Bad Martha's.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
And Winery, Cape Cod Winery.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Common Victular, 4170, 71 Water Street, Bangkok Thai Cuisine, Bear and Boots, British Beer Company, Bucatino Restaurant, Sea Salt, Casa Vallarta, Celestina Restaurant, Coonamessett Farm, Country Fair, Crab Apples, Crepe Cod, DJ's Famous Wings, Eat Your Heart Out Cafe and Gourmet Market, Falmouth Country Club, Falmouth Lodge number 2380, Falmouth Percy's Place, Falmouth Yacht Club, Homeport Sushi, Josh's at Davisville, Liam McGuire's, Mary Ellen Portuguese Bakery, Martha's Eats, Munica's Cafe, New Generation Donuts, 363 East Falmouth, New Generation Donuts LLC, 4 Sandwich Road, New Generation Donuts LLC, 614 Main Street, New Generation Donuts LLC, 634 Holly Park Road, New Golden Dynasty, New Peking Palace, Osteria La Civetta, Paul's Pizza, Pickle Jar Kitchen, Pie in the Sky, Pizza and Subs 2, Quarter Deck Restaurant, Quick Soul Tavern, Seafood Sam's, Simply Divine Pizza, Steve's Pizzeria and more, TJC at Saconesset, Thai Kitchen, the Flying Bridge, the Golden Swan, Water Street Kitchen, Woods Hole Golf Club.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Innholder Victular, Coonamessett Inn, Palmer House Inn, Seacrest Beach Hotel.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
You're up, Doug.
Entertainment, 4170 at 71 Water Street. British Beer Company, Bucatino Restaurant, Cape Cod Winery, Casa Vallarta, Coonamessett Farm, Coonamessett Inn, Falmouth Yacht Club, Josh's at Davisville, Liam McGuire's, Martha's Eats, New Peking Palace, Pie in the Sky, Quarter Deck Restaurant, Quick's Hole Tavern, Seacrest Beach Hotel, Simply Divine Pizza, St. Anthony's, the Golf Club at Succonesset, the Flying Bridge, and Woods Hole Golf Club.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Sunday Entertainment, 4170, British Beer Company, Bucatino Restaurant, Coonamessett Inn, Falmouth Yacht Club, Liam McGuire's, Quick's Hole Tavern, Flying Bridge.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Amusements, DJ's Famous Wings, Falmouth Lodge 2380, Pizza One Subs 2, Seacrest Beach Hotel.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Inn holder, Admiralty Inn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motor Vehicle Class 1 and 2, Braga's Auto Sales, Falmouth Pier 37, Tatum Enterprises, with 2 locations, 40 Davis Streets and 94 East Falmouth Highway, O'Hara Motors, Sandy's Auto Sales, T-Ticket Auto Body.
Second.
Just a quick thing, that's class 1 to 3.
Oh, excuse me.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Vehicle for Hire, KB Transportation, and Weber Livery Service.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Is the family of Kathleen Murray here?
Just came in.
Welcome. We're going to go back to our open session number 3 for proclamation. Mr. Jones?
Well, it gives me great honor to read the proclamation, but also great sadness to have to say that this proclamation is both timely and a little bit past due, because Kathleen did pass away this weekend. Kathleen was a dear friend of my family. She was a relative and someone I knew very well from science school as a neighbor. And so I'm pleased to be able to read this proclamation in her honor. Whereas Kathy Murray's contributions to our town began almost as soon as she moved to Falmouth. And whereas in the course of those 35 years, Kathy has distinguished herself as both an elected official, town meeting member for Precinct 1 and 2 for 6 years, and member of the Board of Library Trustees for the past 15 years, and as an active member of the following organizations: League of Women Voters of the Falmouth Board member and observer of the Board of Selectmen for the League's Observer Corps for more than 10 years, a coordinator of library volunteers for VIPS for over a decade, substitute school librarian at every Falmouth public school at every level, a treasurer of Spore Gardens for more than a decade, historian for the Woods Hole Women's Club for several years, treasurer for St. Barnabas Church for multiple years, a board members for the Friends of the Falmouth Public Library, as well as an active participant in staging and working at the Friends' widely acclaimed annual book sale, and treasurer of the Children's School of Science in Woods Hole for multiple years. And whereas Kathy's keen intelligence, inquisitiveness, dedication, and hard work have greatly enriched not only each of these organizations and the town itself, and whereas Kathy has said, you don't have to get involved in town to appreciate what it has to offer, but the more you get involved, the more you love Falmouth. Therefore, with this proclamation of gratitude, we return in part the love that your townspeople feel for you, Kathleen. In witness whereof we, Susan L. Moran, Megan English Braga, Doug Jones, Samuel H. Patterson, and Douglas C. Brown have hereunto set our hand and caused the great seal of the town of Falmouth to be affixed. So move.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We're going to be signing the proclamation right now. It'll be ready for the original to be picked up tomorrow. And I just want to add that, I'm just going to miss her brightness and the fact that she always had an important, positive criticism to make that we all really learned from in many different ways. And she just was an exemplary person. So, sympathies to the family. We will all miss her.
Would my sister say something, please?
Please. To the microphone, if you don't mind, and just to introduce yourself.
I'm Shannon Hurley. I'm Kathleen's youngest sister. I just want to say that Kathleen loved this town. She always did. We heard a lot about this town, and she always encouraged us to come here and experience it. She knew that she was getting this commendation as she was dying, and it made her day. She was so excited. She called me up and was just so pleased and honored. So on her behalf, thank you.
Appreciate that, very important to know. And I want to recognize some members of the League of Women Voters, Sylvia, who I see, and others, and thank you, to put this together for her. So you have a lot of company right in the room. Thank you.
We have
From
quite a few of the library trustees.
And
who-
library trustees as well, so. Can I say just a couple words? Please.
My name is Elizabeth Abrams. I'm Chair of the Falmouth Public Library Board of Trustees, and she was on the Board of Trustees for over 15 years, just over 15 years. And I will really, really miss her. She had a deep knowledge of library practices and policies. She had an awareness of the history of the Falmouth Public Library as well as the town of Falmouth. She knew how everything worked. I don't always know that, so whenever I had a question, I could go to Kathy, and she would have an answer. She was kind of a policy wonk, you know? She knew minute little details about everything. She was a person I relied on all the time. She knew everyone in Falmouth. Everyone and anyone. She knew the people, what board they'd served on, what they were doing now. She volunteered in so many more capacities than I can count, and she was a very private person. But I found her to be a very courageous person in many aspects over the course of her life, so she will be missed. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Please.
I'm Judy Stetson. I know her as a League member and admire her the way all the rest of us do. There were two other things I just quickly want to add. Adventurous. She joined an SEA trip to Pacific, to say rather with SEA, the Sea Education Association. And right in my own neighborhood, she loved to sail. And she sailed in Quistit Harbor, those wonderful little Herreshoffs we have, and I think they were the group called the Lily Pads. She had such fun in her life as well as contributing so much to us. We will all miss her, and we all valued her. Thank you.
Very well said. Next on the agenda, we have recognition by Ms. Braga.
Just a brief recognition. I just wanted to thank all of the folks for participating in the many different ways that people participated in town meeting last week. It went on for 3 days. Takes a lot of individuals from the town, a lot of staff members, and folks from FCTV to actually, make it sort of function, the nuts and bolts of it. And then obviously all the town meeting members and staff who showed up for two really long nights and one sort of moderately long night in tough weather. And we got through a lot. Wasn't the most graceful, perhaps, of warrants that we've had to deal with, but people really stuck it out. And it was, even with some of the frustration that we did hear from folks, and that I think, we talked a little bit about during the process, people were very civil. Folks came, they asked the questions they had, people answered the questions to the best of their ability. And so it was, again, just another exercise in that type of government that is, is messy, it's hands-on, but it really does get a lot of input from members of the town. And so just a thank you to everyone who participated.
Absolutely. Next, announcements.
I don't think I have any.
Seeing none, we'll next move to the public comment part of our meeting, where it's an opportunity for anyone in the audience to speak about something that's not on the agenda. Please, Jack, go right ahead. Welcome.
Good evening. My name is Jack Carroll. I live on Two Ponds Road, and I'm here to put a face to a correspondence that I sent to the board a few days ago relative to the Cape Cod Marathon, which I am a big supporter of. I have run it numerous times, and I've volunteered quite a few years, and I was the start and finish line director for a number of years. But the point of my correspondence to you is to encourage the town council to take a very serious look at the Cape Cod Marathon course. I know next year they're going into a major course change, and I think it's the opportune time to look at the finish, which goes through Main Street and does tie up Main Street for a good part of a Sunday morning, and weigh and balance that as you look to approve the race for next year. There are some other places that I think might be better served, and that's my personal opinion. I don't represent the Falmouth Track Club, even though I'm a member.
I think there are other places in town that might be better served to have the marathon start and finish there. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, we'll move to the summary of actions. The first item is under licenses, an application for 2 special one-day all-alcohol liquor licenses for the Falmouth Theater Guild Highfield Theater at 58 Highfield Drive for Friday, December 7, and Saturday, December 8.
I'm looking at that, I remember the last time we saw this, they
Yes.
did have a few left, and so
Yes.
this, I think they're still within the limit, so I would move approval.
I would second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 And I did ask, I don't know if it went through to, in cases where there, have been a number of requests, if we could have a count so that we're sure when we go to approve that the point that Mr. Jones made is taken care of.
Certainly.
Great, thank you. Next, under administrative orders, we have whether to vote to approve an Eversource request to locate one pole number 460/25 and remove one pole number 460/25 on Dillingham Ave, east of Morris Pond Road, due to construction of rear entrance on Dillingham. So that would be for the town's construction?
Yes.
I move approval.
All those in
Second.
favor? Thank you.
Aye.
All right. Next, we have an administrative order with respect to the Massachusetts Environmental Trust Grant, interpretive and directional signage for Coonamessett Greenway. I see Dr. Gladfelder is here. Is this the Coonamessett Greenway signage? Do you want to just give us a little outline? Welcome.
Welcome, good evening. Betsy Gladfelder, Conservation Commission. This is we're putting interpretive signs along the river, which is apparently why, this is the same grant request you approved last year, and apparently we didn't get it because people were confused that these interpretive signs would be along a body-way. And so I'm re-emphasizing that a river is a water body. And so that's what it is. There are a number of people in town and a number of groups that will be helping put these together. And as we're about to go into phase 2 of construction, I'm going to sort of shift my emphasis at work into getting these interpretive signs ready to go. And so when we have the money, we can get them made.
I would move that we add our support to this request grant.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you for your
Thanks.
work.
Thanks again, Betsy.
Next, we have whether to vote to approve a letter to the governor in support of Open Cape's request to release $200,000 in the approved economic development bill for the installation of high-speed internet service to Main Street merchants. This is something our legislators have already put in a supportive request. I see Mr. Galasso is here. Mike, do you want to step up and give us a quick outline here?
Great, thank you, Madam Chair. Michael Galasso with the EDIC. Just real quick, we've been working with the merchants on Main Street along with the Chamber for the last year or so. Many of them were complaining that they didn't have appropriate internet access as they tried to run their credit cards through the internet. So we started working with Open Cape to try to get some money together. We've got $80,000, which was in the budget last year, and $200,000, which is in the economic development bill. So this letter that you're proposing tonight will help go a long way to get that money released from the economic development bill, and I urge you to approve it and send the letter up to the governor. Thank you.
I'd move that we vote to approve the letter to the governor.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike.
Next, we have on the agenda under special events, a new but recommended event, whether to approve an application for a beach wedding ceremony on Old Silver Beach, Saturday, June 8, 2019, for Couture.
I move approval. I see that they checked with our superintendent, Bruce Magardo, and he okayed it.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Next, we have on the agenda under business, discussion and action on a proposed host community agreement for medical marijuana.
Well, I guess I'm a little bit concerned that we are doing that quite so early,
Right.
because people might be coming here, and I'm
Yeah,
just not
we
sure
are moving them along quickly. All right, so let's hold 1 and 2 then.
I'm not sure what we can really do.
Maybe minutes
the
and individual
interviews?
selectmen reports?
Is there anyone here to interview for a committee position? Okay, so that takes care of that.
We were too efficient with our license renewals.
Could we do the Affordable Housing Fund?
That's what I was thinking.
I see Carl is here.
I see Carl.
I can go get my glass out. I think he just stepped out.
Great.
Could we do
Next.
minutes while we're waiting, or no?
I don't know if he's right there or not.
Where's the property tax allocation? Oh, that's a
Okay, so
hearing.
next
That's a
on the
hearing.
agenda, we'll take the item number 4, which is the Board of Selectmen acting as trustees of Falmouth Affordable Housing Fund. 2 items, Megantic Crossing presentation and application for 650,000 10-unit rental housing at 676, 688, and 702 North Falmouth Highway, and Board of Selectmen to discuss and consider approval. Welcome, Mr. Glasso.
Thank you. Michael Glass from Megantic Crossing LLC. Many of you are familiar with this project. It's been around since 2009, when it was originally approved, has a LIP with 10 units and 5 buildings. We redesigned it after acquiring the site to change the layout of the buildings. They had all 3 bedrooms on the second floor. We thought that the market really wanted to have at least one of the bedrooms, one of the 3 bedrooms on the ground floor. So we redesigned it, and which was approved by the board a number of years ago. We actually tried to add 2 additional units to the project to increase it from 10 to 12. That was denied by the ZBA. So we've been following through with the project that includes 10 units and 5 buildings. Each building has a 3-bedroom unit and a 2-bedroom unit. They're all visitable. We've changed it from a for-sale project to a rental project. We think that meets a lot of the criteria that's in the housing production plan, the draft housing production plan. We also wanted to design a project that we thought was going to be a model moving forward for the town for 40Bs and LIP projects. So all the buildings will meet Energy Star requirements, so they'll be very energy efficient. They all have a 1-car parking garage, and that parking garage will be electric car charging station. We think that's the future, that many more people are going to have electric cars in the number of years ahead. There is a community garden that's available for the tenants, and a children's play area. In addition to that, there'll also be a sheltered bus station. Not a bus station, but a bus shelter for the transit. It'll also be one of the first projects, as we were talking about Open Cape, that will be connected to Open Cape. The line goes right down 28A, and so we have a letter of an agreement from Open Cape to include this as one of the first affordable housing projects that they will be connecting Open Cape to. The project was designed to be in conformance with the historical character of North Falmouth and Megantic area. We've had a number of presentations in front of the ZBA and also with the community. I believe that in your packet you should see a number of letters approving the project by the Falmouth Affordable Housing Committee. And we met with the neighbors, had 2 open sessions at the North Falmouth Elementary School. So what we're presenting to you tonight is the project's been approved for $650,000 from the Falmouth Affordable Housing Fund. We'll leverage that with an application which is due November 29th to the state for an additional $1 million. That will, along with our construction loan commitment letter, that will complete the financing package for the project. All the units, 100% of the units, will now be affordable at a range from 80% to 100%. And with that and your approval, we'll make the application to the state. They've already seen this project a couple of times. Unfortunately, we didn't make it in the last round, but I've got pretty good assurance from the Department of Housing and Community Development that we have an excellent chance of getting the $1 million that we'll be requesting in this round. So if there's any questions, available to answer them that you may have. The request has been approved by the working group. It also was approved last Thursday night by the Community Preservation Committee.
Quick question, Mike, is this affordability in perpetuity?
Yes.
Doug?
I think this is the 3rd time that I've heard a presentation on this project, and I'm thrilled that it has moved to a 100% affordable, whether it's the 80% level or the 100% level for the income. Was there any money that we already put forward to this project? Did we promise money and it didn't get spent because we haven't moved forward? I just can't remember whether we had already earmarked some money for this project.
No, we've been paying for the cost of carrying the property and all the approvals and all the drawings and everything, but there hasn't been any money from the town to the state.
I just also want to say I'm really pleased that it's rental now as well. I think that you're spot on, that does fill a particular need that we continue to hear about, so I think that's really positive.
Madam Chair, we didn't, actually, I don't think we got any correspondence from the Community Preservation Committee, but I can attest to the fact that I was present on their Thursday meeting, and they did vote to recommend this allocation.
I think we did get an email just recently.
Correct, an email came in late in the,
This
during the
afternoon,
day.
I think,
Yeah.
late
Oh, maybe
today.
it was, okay.
Yeah. Not in our packet, you're right.
I'm familiar with it, and as I've seen this project before, and I'm glad it's still alive, and happy to be funding it.
Thanks.
Is that, I'm glad we did get it. Is it something we need to get from the CPC for us to award money from the Affordable Housing Fund as the trustees? Or is that just something that's good to have to make sure we're on the same page?
No, actually, the enabling legislation from the state states that we have to get a recommendation from CPC.
Right.
And for the most part, they're the agent, they're the organization that's actually funding the fund. We don't have a lot of revenues coming in from other sources at this point. So it's important, I think, that they stay, linked in and have ownership in it. And certainly, Holly Wilson, is constantly communicating with the committee, keeping them up to date about these various. And then I'm a liaison, and Carla came to the meeting last Thursday and reported on this project and the rationale that the working group, of which I'm also a member, used in awarding this allocation.
I get my leaning was I was hoping it was not required and that we would ask them for their thoughts about it and then could honor that they're a part of it, but since it's required, we have no choice anyway. But
Yeah.
But we're
Madam Chair,
still honored.
I do have a copy of the note that was sent today, and it indicated that there was a vote of 6-1 last Thursday to recommend the expenditure of $650,000 to the board for this project.
And the other difference between this and normal CPC money is this does not need to go to town meeting because it's already been put in the fund by town meeting for then the Board of Trustees, the Board of Selectmen to act as trustees to then spend the money.
Correct.
And if I might say, the history is that this fund was set up exactly for that reason, so they can respond to needs like this one, where Michael needs a commitment by November 29th to be able to support his application. And there have been some other cases where we've awarded, the CPC and the Board of Selectmen have awarded funds for doing some survey work that was required to move a project on. So whenever there's a short-term need, not a major acquisition, this is how the process works, and it allows us the flexibility to move a little more quickly than having to take everything through town meeting.
Right.
Actually, if I could just add one thing, I believe the working group awarded the money with one condition attached to it, which is that it needs to be spent, the project to start within 2 years. And we're fine with that condition. We're ready to start.
Good. That's a good condition. Is there someone who's ready to make the motion?
I would just, I know, having heard the presentation before, I would love to see if there is any public comment, because we have heard public comment in the past
Sure.
when this project came forward.
Mark?
Mark Finneran, Precinct 6. My comment or question is, I'm glad to hear that residential units are proposed to be hitched up to the Open Cape, which I think is, what, $13 million deep in taxpayer money? And I'm wondering if other residences along the route will be able to access the Open Cape as well, and what cost? Thanks.
Thanks. That's something we can forward to Open Cape. Good question. Does anyone else have a comment? Carla? Please.
Hi, Carla Froni, Falmouth Housing Coordinator. I'd like to tell you on behalf of the working group how we reviewed this application and how deeply we reviewed this application. As Michael had mentioned, and as you all know, this project, way before my time, started out in 2009, I think, with a comprehensive permit back then. And it has gone through a couple of different iterations and changes, and for a while it was proposed to be ownership. And Michael came to the working group a couple of months ago, and at that time he was proposing only 3 affordable rental units. And we had a discussion with him about our interests and the needs of Falmouth and the need for rental units, and we were looking for more affordable units. And to his credit, he went back to the drawing board and came back with 100% affordable. And we were very pleased with the application when it came towards us. We reviewed the numbers with our ex officio member, Laura Schufeld from the state, and Laura has a lot of expertise in the financial end of these projects. And she was thinking that it's very difficult for a developer to make these projects work when they're at a smaller scale like this. And it would be highly unlikely it could move forward without these kinds of subsidies. So the group voted or met consensus. We don't really vote, but we got to a consensus where we all agreed that this was a project that was very worthy of our funding, and funding for the full ask amount of $650,000.
Appreciate that, thank you.
Welcome.
Would you like a motion?
Please.
I move that the Board of Selectmen, acting as trustees of the Falmouth Affordable Housing Fund, hereby award $650,000 from the Falmouth Affordable Housing Fund to Megansett Crossing LLC to develop 10 100% affordable rental apartments located at 676, 688, and 702 North Falmouth Highway, as described in an application submitted November 2nd, 2018, and subject to the terms and commitment letter to be issued by the town manager in consultation with town council.
Second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Congratulations. Thanks to everyone who worked on
Thank
this.
you.
Minutes?
Yeah.
We have 1 second.
Yeah, we've got a few minutes. Let's jump to approval of minutes.
Madam Chair, I have one edit to the open session minutes of Monday, November the 5th, 2018. On page 2, the third paragraph from the bottom, as Mr. Patterson noted, in terms of LIP qualification, need to create housing for, and it just says talent, but I think that really meant town employees, health workers, teachers, fire, police, and so forth. So if we could just make that a little bit more.
It's for talented town employees.
So with that edit,
I move
Mr. Johnson's
approval.
Bob, you have that?
I move approval and release.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Great. And do we have the Rosemary Carey here?
She's not here.
Okay, do we have Judy McGrath? Do we have Carol Kenny? I don't see
No,
Carol.
Carol's
Okay. Hold off on those. Seems like everything else is a little bit too long to squeeze in here. Let's do early selectmen's reports. Doug?
I don't have a big report this week, I'm sorry, I don't have any time to kill.
Don't be sorry. We need to fit it into 4 minutes, so it's perfect.
It's perfect.
Come on, you can help out stalling here a little bit.
Sam?
Sure, I have a few things I might mention. I did attend the Cape Cod Selectmen and Counselors Association meeting a week and a half ago, I guess now. John Cox, the president of the Cape Cod Community College, spoke to us and talked about the programs there and the kinds of evolution of programs that he's been fostering over the last 3 to 5 years. Very interesting and an informative discussion for us. Also, you heard that I participated in the Affordable Housing Fund Working Group. The Veterans Day Parade and Ceremony was outstanding. The weather was kind to us, and beautiful sunshiny day, and very inspiring for sure. And it's a great way for this town to recognize the contributions of servicemen in the past, not only World War I, but all of the other wars that we fought in up to today, and continue to fight in, for that matter. It was a short CPC meeting, as I mentioned, but I managed to catch that before town meeting started and before they adjourned for that purpose. And the last thing is, yesterday I attended Edward Geisiger's Eagle Court of Honor on your behalf, and it was quite an impressive group of people, a very large turnout, and I think a real tribute to the quality of the young man that Edward is, and the quality of leadership that helps to put together the scouting program that allows scouts to move up through the Eagle ranks. And I should recognize his parents, Frank Geisiger and Drade Geisiger, who are solid, supportive citizens in this community, not just working for their children's benefit, but for all children in Falmouth.
I do have
Ms.
one,
Braga?
one thing I could report, I
Oh, too
suppose.
late, you had your chance.
All right.
Go
Just
ahead.
that I attended the Charter Review Committee meeting today to discuss all the parameters of the charter and what could be improved, so a lot of good work they're doing, so.
And just push for that for folks. I know Peter Clark made an announcement at town meeting, but there is a charter review going on. If people are, have thoughts about it, have comments, have questions, to get in touch, you can go to the website. There's a survey. There's a number of ways to get in touch and give your thoughts about, any ideas you have about that process or about the charter. So I encourage folks to do that.
And it's a blind survey. If you don't want to put
Right.
your name on it, you don't have to.
I just have one quick announcement. I just want to give really a shout out to the Affirmative Action Committee and to town staff Bobby Richards, who I didn't get to go because we went to a third night for town meeting, but they hosted a film and a discussion. The name of the film was Color of Fear, and they hosted a community discussion. And even with the terrible weather we had last Thursday, I think they had about 30 individuals show up, watch the hour-and-a-half movie, and then stick around for a discussion. So, that's a committee that's had a hard time in the last few years, but they do have a vacancy, but they are moving forward, and they're doing some activities in a nice collaboration between a committee and a town department. So, good stuff.
Very nice. Doug?
Just that one member of the community asked me to look into concerning town meeting about petition articles and how many signatures do you need to get to make an article on the town meeting warrant. Just that she had felt that some of the articles seemed to have been a little bit thrown in together in a fairly haphazard way. And we're trying to figure out what the statute is that requires the numbers, and both Mr. Duffy and Mr. Clark were able to get back to us that it is a state statute that says it is 10 signatures for annual town meeting and 100 signatures for special town meetings. That's not something that we could make it be a little bit onerous, so that just a little bit more thought could be put into some of those articles.
In that regard, I think that, I spoke with Ms. Petit and the town manager about doing some outreach and education for folks who might be interested in posing petitioners' articles, just to see what's already going on at town hall with those issues, so that there can be a coordinated effort put together, and that there could be sort of a 360 view, so that some of those articles, if they do move forward as kind of unique, independent ideas, can be more successful. If they're already part of a town initiative, that they could be incorporated, and I think that'll make it a little smoother going forward. Megan?
And just, I had the same question from someone that Doug had, but just on that same line, I think it was maybe not just the petitioners' articles this go around, but there were, I think it was a little bit of an insight into when articles in general change, whether they're petitioners or a particular board brings them forward. I think, we saw this town meeting a lot of changes to articles that came before, and so when you have sort of 4 pages of changes, I think it's a little challenging. So it might be something, I think, a future agenda item to think about, again, not just petitioners' articles, but articles in general. How do we, what ways can we, sometimes it's inevitable, it happens, and it's printed, and something big changes, but how can we get to a place where that warrant book, is a resource that that town meeting members can really rely on, rather than kind of just being an initial review of something that then changes.
Right, so not just a placeholder, but more of a final presentation of the idea.
Right.
Absolutely.
So I think
Doug?
beyond, I just want to say, I think it's beyond just the petitioner's articles, that maybe it could have some improvement.
Right.
Yeah, I think we need to set realistic deadlines and stick to them, and if the people aren't really prepared, just say, we'll see you on the next town meeting.
Good thought. Thank you, everyone. We're going to move back to the agenda. We have a public hearing scheduled at 7:30 for tax classification.
You need to read the hearing notice.
Yes.
Good evening,
I'm
Tricia
going to just
Favuli,
read the notice. Welcome.
Director of Assessing.
Town of Falmouth Board of Assessors, public hearing notice for fiscal year 2019, property tax allocation and classification hearing. In accordance with the requirements of Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 40, Section 56 of the Falmouth Board of Selectmen will hold a fiscal 2019 property tax classification hearing Monday, November 19, 2018 at 7:30 p.m. in the Selectmen's Meeting Room of Town Hall, 59 Town Hall Square, Falmouth, Mass. The purpose of the public hearing is to consider the percentage of the fiscal year 2019 tax levy to be borne by each class of taxable real and personal property. All persons interested in the determination may appear and be heard at the time and place stated above. It was published in the Friday, November 9, 2018 Enterprise. Thank you. Welcome, Patricia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good to see you all once a year.
Yeah.
It was a year ago, it feels like it
went-
was just like a
I
month or
think you
two
said
ago.
that the
I
last
did not
time.
believe to see this on the
Really
article.
crazy.
It just goes too fast. The Board of Assessors has met, and they have recommendations for you. I have emailed them all to you, so you should have the basic draft. You have the opportunity to make several choices tonight, and I will just go through them briefly. The first choice is a split tax rate. The selectmen may choose to increase the share of the taxes paid by commercial, industrial, real estate, and personal property up to 150% of their adjusted share. The increase to that category would result in a decrease to residential property in the case of Falmouth for fiscal 2019. An increase to commercial, industrial, and personal property reduces the residential rate by 37 cents, but would increase the commercial industrial rate by $4.65. Small business exemption. In order to buffer the impact of the split tax rate on the small business, there's a provision that allows selectmen to offer an exemption for small properties housing businesses with 10 or fewer employees. We estimate there's roughly 400 small businesses in the town of Falmouth. By splitting that tax rate, it would cause them to receive that exemption, but it would also raise their burden because they would have the higher split than the lower split rate. The next choice is the open space discount. Selectmen may offer a discount of 75% up to land that is marked open space. Currently, the Board of Assessors already are reducing open space, and we assess it at a value that reflects the marginal marketability of that property. There's very little value to open space other than to the abutters. It wouldn't be something that would be very marketable. And lastly would be a residential exemption. The Board of Selectmen may elect to offer a tax exemption of up to 20% of the average residential property to all domiciles who are residential. With this exemption, we would increase our residential tax rate to cover the difference that we would be giving as an exemption to all of the residential homeowners that would receive that. So the rate would rise, causing that discount. Do you have any questions of any of the information that I forwarded to you? Doug?
On the document, you did talk about the effect of the shift of, to 150%.
Yes.
For the homeowner of you asked to use a $780,000 property value home. If you could just say that for the public as to what benefit would it actually come down to for the residential. I was surprised how little benefit it actually does come out to.
It's a very small benefit, yes, correct. $179 on the average home for $483,000.
But then for the businesses, it would be
For the
an increase.
business, it would go up $2,000. So anybody that had a business that was assessed at $400,000 or over, it would be going up considerably. We have to shift that burden in order to make up the difference.
And I think in the past, we've been focusing on the regional need to maintain businesses here so that we do have a year-round healthy economy and jobs for people to live here, and that we don't just really suffer the skew of being entirely seasonal or entirely having an older population, that we really want a vibrant, mixed community, and that the current tax form that we use really supports that as best we can.
Well, I think it does, and I think we have a good, strong, independent business base here. We don't have a lot of businesses coming and going. It's pretty stable, and we don't see that in a lot of communities. And I think by doing our rate the way we do, it really helps them.
Megan?
No, just to echo what you're saying, but I think we just want to be really careful not to jeopardize exactly what you're describing. I mean, small business in general, but particularly small businesses are really the lifeblood of the community. It's what the average citizen interacts with on a regular basis. It's what generates a lot of jobs, and I think, I would be really concerned about anything. Again, that payoff doesn't seem to be very much to warrant, shifting that burden.
Not when you look at our small businesses, and 400 of the ones that we're aware of that are registered with the town clerk and registered with the state. We have many other small businesses that just don't register. They're just busy working on their daily jobs and their responsibilities and tend not to come up to the top of the list all the time. So I think we
somewhere around that $2,000, I think is that number that you quoted. I mean, that's not an
That's a lot of
insignificant
money.
amount for a small business.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Tricia, has the board looked at how we can try to level the playing field, given the fact that so many people are coming in and buying second homes and really using up the housing market, which is driving the cost of housing up? And unfortunately, the salaries don't go up proportionally, and so we have this disparity between the cost of housing and your inability to actually earn a salary that would warrant that expense. I know there's a non-resident, premium that you could charge people, but I don't see how it would come back to actually help us level that housing playing field.
Are the second houses personal property?
Yeah, second houses are paying a personal property tax.
Oh, they
and
are?
Yeah,
Oh, I didn't
they're
realize that.
paying 1% to 3%, depending upon the range that they're in. Matter of fact, last year, I had to do a study of second homes, and that means sending out a questionnaire to them, having them report back as to what their assets are in their dwelling, right down to their lawnmowers, plates, pans, everything that they have in their house. We have to do a study and substantiate to the Department of Revenue that our percentage is correct for the percentage of personal property that they have in their dwelling versus the value of their real estate. I understand completely what you're saying. As a chairman of the Housing Authority, I see it every month at our meeting, the list of units that we have available to rent and the waiting list that we have. I don't know, I think the town is facing affordable housing. Mike was just here tonight. That's a wonderful gesture for a developer to put forth and make those all rental units. I sat on that original hearing when I was on the zoning board, and only getting 2 units of affordable housing at the time, but now that we're gonna get those all as rental units, I wish there was more that we could do as a board to look at that, but we're governed by so many regulations from the state with market prices and assessments, and people are they're paying premium prices for real estate right now. It's very sad because there's really not much that is really truly habitable under $300,000 for the first-time home buyer. We've put the first-time home buyer right out of the market again.
So if we went with the split tax rate and went with 150%, and then at the same time granted the residential exemption, the small business exemption, the open space exemption, that would put a higher burden on the personal property tax, would that not?
No, so the second homeowner, they would be paying the personal property tax, and they would pay an additional rate on the value of their real estate, so you're shifting it to them twice now.
Right, that's what I guess I'm suggesting, is I'm saying, well, if they're taking away the housing market, at least we could be getting.
I don't think it's gonna make any difference to the people that are buying here, Doug. They're just,
Yeah.
they're just buying because it's not a need, it's a want.
Right.
It really is.
Luxury.
Megan?
And just on the, I understand the challenge of it and what it does to the housing market, but those folks also do pay in to a lot of services they don't use for
That's
much of the
correct.
year. So, I mean, they are, really contributing to our community in a way that, benefits the rest of us that live here year-round. So, it is a bit of a
schools?
22. It's, I mean, the schools,
The
public
schools,
safety,
the public
all,
they're
yes.
not, because they're not here, so few of them are here.
Right.
They're, you know, we were just out doing an inspection a couple of weeks ago, and they bought the house in July. They've only used it twice since July, and they paid well over $1 million for
Right.
it. So there's not a large drain on our services.
Just any public comment on it?
Is there anyone who wants to speak either in favor or against any of these tax classifications? Seeing none?
I'd move the town of Falmouth continue to tax all classes at the same rate by adopting a factor of 1.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Great
That's
presentation.
Just need your
really-
I move
signature.
that we reject the
Okay.
residential, commercial, and open space exemptions.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Sure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Signing a blank piece of paper.
Yeah, exactly. It can be used for anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
You own our houses.
Thank you very much.
Next, we'll move to the second public hearing, which is an application for a shade tree hearing for the town of Falmouth tree warden, 1 red oak tree and 1 linden tree located at 77 Scranton. The hearing notice is as follows. Notice is hereby given of a public hearing to be held in the Falmouth Board of Selectmen Meeting Room, Town Hall, on Monday, November 19, 2018, at 7:45 PM on the application of the tree warden, Department of Public Works, for the removal of 1 red oak tree and 1 linden tree located at 77 Scranton Avenue. Removal is necessary because the roots have heaved the sidewalk, and the sidewalk in this area needs to comply with ADA requirements. Noticed by the Board of Selectmen, publication date November 9, 2018, in the Falmouth Enterprise. Welcome.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. James Grady, Superintendent of Highways. Before you tonight, looking for permission to take down these 2 trees in question. I've had meetings with Jeremiah Pearson, Park Superintendent and Tree Warden. He's in agreement. They will need to come down to make the necessary improvements. It's important that the sidewalks are accessible and can be used safely, and as you can see by the pictures, the roots have, raised the sidewalk so much that they're almost, you can't even walk on them, let alone run a wheelchair down there. In order to put in new ramps, the tree's gonna have to go. Proposing removing the tree, removing the existing sidewalk, repaving, putting in ADA ramps, and replacing it with 2 new trees. Set a little further back than the existing tree, but
Questions by the board?
No, it's just too bad because they're so nice,
I
but
know, I know.
I mean, there's not much you can do. There's not a lot of room to work
There
with
isn't.
anything there.
Tight space and all.
Any particular type of tree or?
I'm gonna leave that up to Jeremiah. He's the expert here.
I'm just wondering what you're gonna replace them with, what,
I'm not sure. I think one of them would be a Zelkova. On one of the trees, there's lines there, so it couldn't be anything too large. And the other area, there's not, just a small grass strip. So there would be smaller ornamental trees, nothing, not a big shade tree.
Any other questions from the board? Is there anyone here to speak in favor of removal? Seeing none, is there anyone here to speak against removal? Seeing none?
I move we close the hearing.
second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
What's the board's pleasure here?
Well, these are our experts, so,
Reluctantly.
yeah, I mean, unfortunately, there's not much you can do, so I would move, approval of the request to remove these 2 trees, the linden tree and the red oak tree located at 77 Scranton Avenue.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you for the
Thank you.
Thank you.
comprehensive report, appreciate that. Next, we have on the agenda discussion and action on proposed host community agreement for medical marijuana. Mr. Suso, do you want to make introductions?
Certainly, thank you, Madam Chair, and members of the board. As the board will recall, we've had some discussions over the past several months at a couple different times regarding the potential for a medical marijuana facility here in the town of Falmouth. It is consistent with the law in the Commonwealth, of course, as it relates to medical marijuana. And both Chief Edward Dunn and Town Council Frank Duffy have been involved. More recently, we had discussed with the board the potential for a host community agreement, and you had authorized my entering into negotiations with Nature's Remedy. We have representatives here tonight from that organization for a potential host community agreement. We have reached a agreement on that language in the agreement and bring it back to the board for your consideration. There's also a matter of the board's determination as to how you might choose to vote in terms of this potential location. If it's appropriate, Madam Chair, I know there's a representative, Mr. David Miller, representing Nature's Remedy, and perhaps if it's the desire of the board, he can make a few comments.
Sure, and then we'll have the chief and Mr. Duffy after. Mr. Miller? Welcome, right up at the microphone, if you would, for the folks at home, and go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, Madam Chair, board members. My name is Bob Carr, President of Nature's Remedy of Massachusetts, and we'd like to do a short presentation for you of a PowerPoint if it's appropriate. We sent it along. The last meeting that we had before you asked to have an opportunity to get to know us a little bit, who we are, what we do, why we do what we do, and we thought a brief PowerPoint might be helpful as an introduction to that. If you thought that was an appropriate way to go, I think I can give you the quick version of it, and we can go through it. It'll also be available to you for paperback if you or anybody in the audience wants something
How long
from
is
it.
it?
How long is it? I don't know, maybe 14 slides, 10, I can,
Okay, go ahead. So,
okay.
7 minutes.
7 minutes? Okay. I've got my running shoes on. All right.
I just need to log you in.
Thank you.
I'm going to get you a remote, Doug.
It's on this side.
Peter knows.
Oh, it's not. You probably don't really need to do anything. If you want, it would be actually this one. No, we don't. Yeah.
That actually helps. Is it? Yeah, it takes some of the glare off of the.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, that's
So
actually
you can
better.
use that. You could also use the
Okay,
mouse if you like.
great, thank you. Appreciate your help. Again, we're Nature's Remedy of Massachusetts. We're a Massachusetts licensed seed-to-sale marijuana company. It's vertically integrated. In other words, everything that's on our shelves, we make, we produce. In the medical world, that's a requirement. Our founders, myself and John Brady, are both here. We feel we have expansive experience driven by passion. A little bit about us on the next slide. Our cultivation facility is in Lakeville. We have a 50,000 square foot cultivation facility. We're a medical and adult use producer. We have a full product menu. There's edibles, tinctures, rubs. In this day and age, about 50% of all the marijuana products that are used, throughout the country are something other than a flower, which you typically, probably what you're used to hearing. Our medical dispensary located on 31 T-Ticket Highway. What we're looking for here is we're kindly requesting approval of a host community agreement and also a letter of support or non-opposition. Myself, as a partner and the CEO, I've been actually doing what I've been doing for the past 3 years. This has been a startup. We've been going out, we've been fundraising, putting locations together, a business plan, creating relationships, working on our compliance. Before that, I owned and operated a construction company for 26 years up in New Hampshire. I've been in the nonprofit world as well. And I feel like I've put together, a team, part of my team is here, but we put together, qualified professionals to make this work. We have had thorough backgrounds, checked as far as what the DPH requires. My partner over here, John Brady, he'd also probably like to come up at some point and say a few words, so I won't say too much on his behalf right at this point. We have a CFO. He's a licensed public accountant. He's also a certified fraud examiner with 25 years' experience. He holds an MBA from UMass Amherst. We have a director of retail operations. He's owned and operated multi-service sports facilities for 13 years. He's also a licensed attorney. We have our chief marketing officer, and she's also a patient and a patient advocate, Ashley Esper. Licensing status. We've submitted 3 applications to the DPH to operate registered marijuana dispensaries, RMDs. So we've received PCRs, provisional certificates of registrations, for Millbury and Acton, and we're also hoping to receive for Falmouth if approved. We're applying for licenses within the Cannabis Control Commission, which sponsored the adult use recreational dispensaries in Millbury, Tingsboro, and also in Worcester. This is our proposed location here. This has to be the saddest building in the neighborhood. We plan to invest about $250,000 into this building. It needs everything from the inside to the outside. This building is it's in tough shape. But I think it has good lines to work with. So we're looking forward to being able to resurrect this and get new siding on there and fully got the interior of this for our dispensary. This will be a purchase on our part. We're in the Business 2 district. And we're going to work closely with the town of Falmouth to ensure that the proposed RMD is compliant with all zoning bylaws. Security, we've already passed all of our security protocols with the Department of Public Health. At this point, with our location in Lakeville, that's where our grow facility is. They've been in, they've already approved us to grow at this point, so it's a huge milestone for us. We've about 9 months into the construction, and we have our CO and our final approval to begin growing. So, and also in the town of Millbury, we've been through this whole application process from start to finish, so we're very familiar with the process. But with regards to security, the DPH, there's a camera in every corner of the building. They're in every room of the building except for the bathrooms. Everything is it's under extreme scrutiny. If wherever the product can be seen, it has to be under a camera, and it has to be videoed, and it has to be put to a file that's kept for 3 months. There are motion detectors for during the evening hours. If any movement on site, it would go to a call center to make sure it's not a false alarm. We don't want the chief to be coming to false alarms. So the chief we'll work closely with the chief and his lieutenants to ensure that we're compliant with everything they want to do and how they want to do it. Again, our cultivation is in Lakeville. It's a 50,000 square foot facility. We'll be generating our own electricity at this facility. It's a state-of-the-art cultivation extraction. We'll have all the kitchen equipment needed to make our edibles, our tinctures, salves. And at this point, again, we're approved by the state for medical production. And again, we'll have a fully decked out kitchen and extraction room. I won't go too much into our green initiatives. I think you understand that since we're producing our own electricity, and that's what, that's part of our story, is that we want to be, you know, kind to the environment. This industry uses a lot of electricity with lights, and these are things for us to be able to circumvent that, use new technology to help do what we do better, and also help the environment at the same time, and hopefully be a leader in the industry. These are just a couple of shots of our cultivation. The top left picture is just a picture of our generators and equipment called absorbers, where it just takes heat and it transfers. It takes heat and makes cold water, and that's how we refrigerate and dehumidify our rooms. The upper right hand is a picture of our kitchen. Bottom right hand corner is just a picture of one of our flower rooms ready to go, and an extractor is in the bottom left hand corner. This is a picture of our Millbury site. This is probably just a couple days old, but this is where we are, right on Route 146. As you can see, we're trying to beat the weather. So hopefully within, I don't know, another week we'll be closed in tight. Benefits to Falmouth. I hope I'm staying within my 7-minute mark, Madam Chair. We've jobs, at least 15 full-time jobs for the town is what this means. The pay will be in the range of $18 to $20 to start off with. We use local contractors and other services wherever we can. The community host agreement will provide town with additional benefits. Control, the DPH has a comprehensive, again, security requirements, but the Falmouth Police Department, again, they'll have total oversight of everything that we're working on. Access, this is just access to safe, reliable medicine for patients that are coming in that are looking for care. And responsibility, again, we've just gone through multiple rounds of background checks with the DPH under their scrutiny. Our DPH, at the DPH level, Nate just read them, and he must still, even after we if we were, you know, awarded with a letter of support or non-opposition, we still have to go through multiple levels with the DPH, sitting profiles, provisional certificate of registration. Again, these are registrations and certificates that we've already achieved with other towns, so we know the system and the routine. At the local level, the community host agreement, which we're hopefully ready to sign, and we still have to go through site plan approval with the planning board, and any other necessary building permits. And then it's an ongoing interaction with all the municipal departments, including the police department. And that's it. I don't know if my partner, John Brady, usually likes to come up and say a few things about himself, but you know what, we may be beyond our 7-minute mark.
I've just been in ag for 40 years.
Nice to meet you. Please come to the mic and introduce yourself.
My name's John Brady. I've been in the agricultural business for 40 years. I was the CEO of a publicly traded biotech company for agriculture. I've built factories around the world, so I've been in the manufacturing industry for a long time. I met Bob, and we've been doing this over 3 years now, going to town meetings. So we were at the early stage. So appreciate your time. As I say, we're a very professional group of people with professional backgrounds. So there's no stoners here. So thank you very much.
Questions, Mr. Carr, if you want to? So you mentioned an interest in green construction. What kind of green construction is the Falmouth building going to see?
What we'd like to do an Energy Star program. So that means it's filling every void in the building, whether it's windows or heating, ventilation, air conditioning. So it's tight. The windows, the building needs to be fully gutted. So regardless of anything, it's going to have to be brought up to the new energy code. And on top of that, we probably opt to go with triple pane glass. The glass more than likely, unless it's any third story glass, can be is fine. Any glass on the lower floor will have to be impenetrable, but it will be if they have that type of glass, it'll be triple pane glass. you know, all the the heating systems, any lighting will be done with, will be under the Energy Star program. Really, anything we can do, the building just needs a lot of help, right down to what the building is sitting on. The sill itself is starting to rot, so we got to almost start over, so.
Thank you. Questions from other members of the board?
Nope, I'm familiar with it, we talked about it before.
Great, Doug?
Just so people know that one of the things that the town will be getting is, in the first year of operation, 3% of gross sales. Any guess what your first year of gross sales might be, just so we can have the townspeople put a dollar figures to at least one of the items what the town will be getting in?
Yeah, I'll let John talk to that. He's a little bit more on the finance end.
We're hoping for about $6 million in sales. And that would be a good first year, good start, or first full year, not just what's left of the calendar year. So it'd be the first full year. We were thinking that we could do about $6 million here, which is on average of what a lot of the dispensaries do in Massachusetts. And I forget what exactly the Host Community Agreement called for, but I'm sure it's 3%, is that right?
It is.
Of revenues will go there. The one other thing to bring up, that while we are a green company, we have the guiding principles of our company. We have 3 guiding principles. We look at ourselves as, a socially responsible company. And our mantra is, it's the environment, it's people, and then profits. And our feeling is that we're almost zero carbon footprint over in Lakeville. We would invite anybody who would like to come and see it, to see it. It's quite a remarkable place. It's like a clean room. You can almost make microchips in it. We self-generate all of our own electricity. We take the heat from the generators and we create cold water through a process that Einstein invented in the 40s, where we compress salt water, lithium bromide, under pressure, and when it's released causes a chemical reaction like the icy packs, you break them. Same thing, creates cold water, and that's how we create our air conditioning. We then take the heat, the excess heat in the winter, and we heat the facility. And then lastly, in phase 2, we're going to capture the carbon dioxide off of the generators and use those in the grow rooms because that facilitates photosynthesis. So that's environmentally. All of our packaging is environmentally recyclable. The other thing that we use is when it comes to people, we're firm believers in paying a living wage. In our facilities, and anybody that works with us, we will be offering, as Bob said, we'll start at $16 an hour, but within 6 months, we hope to get everybody to $20 an hour. So that's $41,200 a year. If 2 people work for our company, they'd make $82,000 a year, which is $7,000 per above the average annual household income in Massachusetts.
Now, is that the grow facility, or is that the
That's
20
everything that
folks
we
you're
do.
employing in Falmouth?
It's all your employees in Falmouth, and we also will offer medical and dental for all of our employees in Falmouth. And as part of also is our in all the communities that we work in, we'll be offering a college scholarship program to people who can't afford to go to college or to help defray some of the costs, and we'll be offering that to the community as part of that's not part of our HCA, but that's what we do as a company, is we take, when it comes to profits, we believe that you have to give back to the community where you're a part of. We want to be good citizens in the community. Our goal here is not to be recognized as the marijuana people. We want to be recognized as good corporate citizens in the area that give back as much as they work with the community.
You'll love that in Falmouth. Frank, would you come up and just hit the highlights on a couple of the points that were improved in the contract? Thank you, sir. Great presentation. We'll get back with you.
Good evening, Frank Duffy, Town Council. We put together, Mr. Sousa put together a team to help negotiate this host community agreement. Primarily consisted of Mr. Sousa, myself, and Chief Dunn. I believe there were contributions from Peter Johnson Staub and Jennifer Petit along the way. You're doing 2 things tonight. One is you are voting this letter of support or letter of non-opposition. To my understanding, neither one has any particular priority in the licensing procedure. I may stand corrected if that's true, but I think one is the...
We need them both.
Okay, fine. Now, the other thing we did is we negotiated a host community agreement. And I'll just go through some of the highlights. Early in the process, there was no cap on the host community agreement. So some of the communities that initially adopted or negotiated host community agreements kind of reached for the stars, so to speak, and they asked for contributions or impact fees from the registered marijuana dispensaries that they perhaps thought were excessive. So the legislature, I think about a year ago, imposed a cap on the impact fee that we could negotiate. And that impact fee is capped at 3% of gross sales of the marijuana establishment. And the impact fee has a time limit of 5 years. The host community agreement that we have negotiated with Nature's Remedy contains those provisions and conforms with the statute. Now, in the host community agreement, we must identify the town departments and services that are going to be impacted by the presence of the registered marijuana dispensary in town so that we can justify this as an impact fee. We've identified in the agreement the police department and law enforcement, the fire rescue department, the Department of Human Services, the Department of Public Works, inspectional services, permitting and planning, and the school department is a very significant department. We've also identified or suggested in the agreement that there may be unforeseen impacts, which we can identify at some later time. As I said, the impact fee is 3% of gross sales. It's to be paid 60 days after the end of each quarter. That would be March, June, September, and December. That's the end of the quarter. The company agrees that the payments are reasonably related to the impacts of the town. Any payment will be accompanied by a certificate of a certified public accountant or by the chief financial officer of the company as to the gross revenues during that quarter, so we can have some assurances as to what we're entitled to. Any revenue that we receive from the host community agreement is part of general revenue. So this money, whatever the amount is, will go into our general revenue account, and town meeting will have to appropriate the money in the annual budgetary process. In addition to this, the company has also specified in the agreement that it will annually contribute to public charities in the town an amount no less than 1% of gross revenues. We're not allowed to have any say in who those charities are, but they have agreed to tell us who they are, and it's up to them within their discretion as to how to distribute it. The company will further do a few other things. It has agreed to provide staff to participate in town-sponsored educational programs on public health and drug abuse prevention. And in addition to the usual things that we would expect, that they will maintain a neat and tidy condition of their operations, which they have been explaining to us earlier tonight. They will be cooperating with any town department that has jurisdiction over them. They will comply with all general and zoning bylaws and any rules and regulations of any department that they are subject to. They've also agreed to make reasonable efforts to hire local vendors and workers in the establishment of the registered marijuana dispensary. The property and the personal property of this company will be subject to taxation, like any other business. There's no exemption sought or allowed. We also have a provision in this agreement. It may never be operational, but in the event that this facility expands and becomes something that it is not right now, we will renegotiate this community or host community agreement to reflect a change in
You're talking about
purpose.
recreational marijuana?
That's if. Now, of course, it's a local option. We haven't done it.
Mhm.
We don't know what people may do, so we
But they'd
put
be
it,
coming back to the board. It wouldn't be
right,
wouldn't be
but
automatic.
it's in the language, though, that we would be doing that. And those are the highlights of the host community agreement. As I said, quite a bit of work and back and forth has gone into this. And I believe we submitted a copy to the gentleman from Nature's Remedy, and I understand it's been agreed to. So you'll be voting to accept this, and also one of the two letters that they're looking for.
Thank you. Chief of Police, please Welcome.
Edward Dunn, Chief of Police. As you're all aware, this became law many years ago, several years ago, and been working with the town manager and town council with David Miller from Nature's Remedy. They've been very open about it. They are highly regulated by the DPH, and we've had conversations about the security measures and policies and things like that, and they assure me that we, the police department, will be involved in those.
Any questions for town council or the chief of police? Doug?
In acting as a host, is there any possibility of any kind of liability on our part?
Mr. Duffy?
In my opinion, the answer to that question would be no, although the agreement is called a host community agreement. That's what it is called in state law, so we're just following that language. But while we are the host to this operation, we are the host in the same, to the same degree that we're a host to a restaurant or any other business organization. There's no connection between the two.
Okay, thank you.
One other thing in the host community agreement I did want to point out that I approved of was the provision that if the company enters into some other host community agreement with another community that's better than this, we get the benefit of that community agreement also, that sort of always a little bit in flux. If there's something better out there, we get the benefit of somebody else's better negotiation strategies.
That's good.
Right, so in addition to whether or not to approve this agreement, we also have the decision of whether to execute a letter of non-opposition or a letter of support. The process will follow through according to the state guidelines. Obviously, I think it's, there is a difference between non-opposition and support being more favorable.
I would at least separate them, and I would move the approval of the host community agreement with Nature's Remedy as a first step.
Could I just ask, are we having any, are we going to take any public comment before we make that decision, or?
We will. We'll take a second on the contract first, and then we'll go to public
Then
comment.
I'd second. I'm sorry, did you say on the contract, right?
On the host
Yes.
community agreement, and then the other one I think would be more appropriate for public comment than the agreement part of it.
Madam Chair, my only hesitation, I lean toward the non-opposition. And the reason is because this is all so new to us.
Right, I'm saying separate the two discussions, and let's just discuss the community agreement, and then discuss the other one separately.
So
So then I
on the
second
contract.
the contract, because I agree that I think it's more appropriate to have a discussion about the other piece of it, so I would second
Absolutely.
the contract.
Before we take a vote, though, is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak on the issue of the contract or medical marijuana in Falmouth? Mark?
Mark Finner, just curious, you said there was a 5-year limit on this contract. The 3% doesn't sunset by any means. We would renegotiate the same thing with the same state limit of 3%?
Right now, the state limit for the contract is 5 years, and after 5 years, there may not be any further agreement. It depends on what the state determines the law to be, but after 5 years.
We could lose the 180K?
Yes. And then we would just get the taxes that come from the
Right, everybody
business.
else gets.
Yes.
The state's limited us, and we can't do anything better than that.
Anybody else? Okay, so on the contract, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous? Next?
I would move the approval of the letter of support.
If I may.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay,
second
in discussion?
I just think if we're gonna enter into something, I mean, we're either entering into it and we're doing it. I think we're approving a host agreement, and, if there's a benefit that we're gonna derive for the community, which is maybe hopefully not insignificant, if it's the $300,000 number, that's maybe a little bit more optimistic. Over that 5-year period, that's not a small amount of money to come for the town. So if we're gonna enter into it, whatever we can do to make sure that this goes forward, I think there is a difference for the state, whether it's.
Expediting effect.
Yeah, exactly.
Doug?
I like the fact that they've chosen one of the most rundown buildings in town and offered to rehabilitate it. That's a hurting area there.
It's also the right zone, but yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that I think the point, that particular building really is a bit of an eyesore and needs some
It's a great opportunity.
TLC.
I'm in favor of the letter of support myself.
I'm also, the reason why I'm suggesting letter of support is in addition to the financial benefit, I do think there are some people who really benefit from the medicinal quantities of value of marijuana, and if we can get that to some of our residents, and I fully support that.
It's been interesting to read and learn so much about it over these last couple of years since we've been talking about it. It's like a whole new, I don't know if it's a field of medicine, but it's a whole new concept, for me anyway.
Absolutely. All right, any other discussion?
And this is where I would also see if there's any public on that part of it.
Is there anyone in the room who would like to make a comment with respect to the letter of non-opposition or letter of support? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Letter of support.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for the presentation, very comprehensive.
you.
Appreciate it, and thank you, Chief, and to Town Council.
I did see Rosemary Carey come in.
Oh, good. Thank you. Next, we have an interview vote and appoint for committee member Cape and Vineyard Electric Co-op, CVEC, Rosemary Carey. Welcome, Rosemary.
Thank you, Peter.
Hello, thank you. I'm Rosemary Carey, North Falmouth.
And tell us about your interest in this committee, please.
Okay, well, as you know, I'm a very strong advocate for renewable energy, and I learned about the Cape and Vineyards Electric Cooperative and how it works to bring Cape Cod towns together to advance renewable energy across the Cape and Martha's Vineyard. So I'm interested in being a part of that and a voice for Falmouth.
Any questions for Rosemary?
No, I would just say that she's like the folks that move here who dive right in, and I know you haven't been here for long, a couple of years, so, full-time, so it's great to see you getting involved and really working on something that you're passionate about, so thank you.
Right.
And also the 360, I mean, all of the things that you're doing in the community kind of all fit around that, efficient energy and advocacy, and, you really know your stuff. That's really
Thank you.
appreciated.
I appreciate it, yes.
Mr.
Okay.
Walker.
Mr. Walker, please. Sure, come right up.
I guess
You
I'm
don't-
going to
you don't
object.
wanna,
I don't think comments on, public comments on applicants is appropriate.
I'll take
Yeah,
that. We think we know you're in favor, but it's not something we typically do, so I take back my approval of that, based upon,
I just think it sets a precedent that we could also be getting negative comment, and
that,
just
I think that makes, based upon Mr. Jones' request, I think he's right. Nick, thank you very much.
Thank you for your non-comment.
We were reading your mind anyway.
Yeah, we could tell.
Is there someone who would like to make a motion?
I just do want to point out, unfortunately, this is a term that ends on June 30th, 2019, so it will be something you have to reapply for the longer term. But I would move approval
That's
of
fair.
appointment of Rosemary Carey to the CVEC to term ending June 30th, 2019.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, for the Commission on Disabilities, Judy McGrath. Welcome.
Wow. Thanks for having me tonight. I have a little,
Please,
little
thank you
nervous.
for
Don't
volunteering.
be nervous.
Why don't you pull that mic down for this benefit?
None of us know what we're doing, so.
Thank you.
I'm Judy McGrath. I've worked for many years serving the needs of both children and adults with disabilities. The needs of people with disabilities involve so much more than just handicap parking. Educating the public is essential in order to minimize discrimination and lack of access for all people with disabilities. I have had personal experience watching my brother-in-law, who had a significant physical disability. He worked every day of his life. He was an active member. I'm sorry, what?
No, you're fine.
Active member of the community, and he was a truly amazing individual. Now, due to current circumstances, I too can identify as a person with a disability, and I believe my life experiences will help me be an asset to the commission. Thanks.
Very good introduction of yourself. Other questions for the applicant?
No,
She just answered them.
Yeah, I see you volunteered at the wellness fair, which is great. I think those are
We had a
great.
great thing on Saturday also at the
Yes,
rec
at the
center.
rec
It was
center.
incredible, absolutely incredible.
And it's a great time. There's a lot that the committee is doing, and I think, you know, just the point that you raise about the diversity of different types of disability that we sometimes focus on, you know, really the ones that are easy to see, or we
Absolutely.
think about the things with mobility.
Never
and
know.
So,
Yes.
yeah, so it's really important
Exactly.
that there's a voice for folks with various levels of ability, so that's
Yes.
great.
In that case, I'll take a motion.
I would move that we appoint Judy McGrath, the Commission on Disabilities, term ending June 30th, 2019.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all so much.
We now have Council on Aging, Attorney Carol Kenny. Familiar face. Welcome, Carol. Thanks for applying.
Yeah, I'm interested in that seat. I did serve once before, and then I resigned because of the term limits. But I have been a volunteer attorney since the program began over 20 years ago at the senior center. So I would like to be back on the council.
Thank you for that. Any questions for Attorney Kenny?
No, very qualified.
Obviously, very qualified.
And well-connected with the Council on Aging.
Not to mention the community as a whole,
Right,
so.
many different organizations here.
Yeah. Well, I move that we appoint Carol Kenny to a term ending June 30th, 2021.
Thank you.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is consideration of the motion, quote, to proceed with design on the Main Street Corridor project from Palmer Avenue to Sandwich Road and investigate potential alternative options along Route 28 from Sandwich Road to Oxbow Road. And I just want to note that next on the agenda is to vote a Route 28 Citizens Committee. So I see that Mr. Jack is in the audience. If you might just come and give us a quick overview. I know we've had a lot of community outreach here.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The reason I'm here tonight is to ask the board to be able to move forward with design of the Route 28 project from Palmer Avenue out to Sandwich Road and evaluate whatever potential options and alternatives there may be for the area east of Sandwich Road through Oxbow, which is the total corridor area that's being facilitated by the water main. One of the quick points I would like to make is I know there are some out there that are under the misunderstanding that the water main project and the Route 28 transportation project are directly connected, and the answer is no, they're not. They are completely separate projects. We funded the water main through this town meeting. It's expected that that project will begin construction this spring. It's expected that it would be a 4-period construction project, so we would have a summertime exclusion. We would not have construction in the summer, but we would start working as soon as the weather would break, which would likely be in March. Then it would be March, April, and May for the spring season, September, October, November, and part of December for the fall season, and then the same thing for the next year, which would be in 2020. Hopefully, if we get a good contractor, we'll be able to finish it up early, maybe in 3 quarters instead of 4. And then for the corridor project, logic says that you want to bring it in on the heels of that project in order to finish everything up, and then life can go on as usual. So as the board's aware, we had received a letter from the state indicating our eligibility for up to $10 million for the corridor project. That's exclusive of the water main, which we are paying for. And that authorizes us to move forward with the planning and funding component of it. So this project would then have to go before the Cape Cod MPO. And the way that that program works, annually, federal funds are distributed to all 50 states. Massachusetts gets $600 million. MassDOT gets the lion's share of it, necessarily so for state transportation initiatives and projects, which include roads, bridges, and public transportation. And then a portion of it is apportioned out toward each of the respective communities. And the way that that's done, it doesn't go directly to a community, it goes to what's known as an MPO, a metropolitan organization. There are 13 of them within the state. Cape Cod is one. Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard are also each separate entities unto themselves. So our MPO gets roughly $9 to $10 million a year, and that's for all of Cape Cod, all of the projects that go through that program. Their program is similar to any town's capital improvement plan, which is usually for a 5-year period or beyond. So theirs is already funded and programmed from fiscal year 19, which is coming up, and all the way through the end of 23. What I'd like to do is to be able to initiate this project on that funding platform this year, such that they redevelop that program around April. So it happens during the course of the winter, and then in April goes out for public comment, which projects are going to be on the list. So we would be going in for the year 2024. As we move through design of the project, we get to a kind of a magic point, which is 25% design. That's when the board, the town, literally has to approve the project before we can go any further at all. So any of the issues that we may have would necessarily need to be resolved at that point. But that's a magic number because at 25%, that's what shows that a town is serious about a project, and there's an opportunity to be able to advance it ahead of schedule on that platform for those projects that aren't necessarily shovel-ready. So logically, for next year, the projects that are actually going to come to fruition on that plan would be those that are ready to go. They've completed 100% design, they're ready to move, and they have all their authorizations. So it's important for us, in order to be able to take advantage of that opportunity, to be able to advance the project into that process. So that's why I'm here this evening.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Megan?
I was just wondering, could you just reiterate, Ray, the question that we asked at our last meeting before town meeting last week, where just the timeline piece, I think you had mentioned the spring is when you're hoping to be around that 25% complete. Is that still correct?
Yes, that would be probably late spring for 25%. And then at that point, it does officially come back to the board in order to be able to proceed with the project. And for all intents and purposes at that point, all of the bugs necessarily need to be ironed out, and it has to be a plan that's acceptable to the board to move forward. Then 75% would be the next threshold, and then finally, ultimately, 100%, and we would be looking at spring of next year for 75%, and hopefully shortly thereafter, 100% within a few months after that.
So just, so any board, however this board, I'm sorry, I just jumped in. However, whichever type of board and committee, excuse me, whichever type of committee this board decides to put together, they're gonna have that work really needs to start right away, or
Yes.
pretty soon, so that they're able to have that input, so that you're able to stay on that timeline for that late spring 25%.
Yes.
For the big picture, and then
So they
obviously
need a
we're,
recommendation ready around April.
yes.
Correct.
Yes.
Mr. Suso, could you, just in case there's anyone tuning in new for the first time today, could you give us a quick overview of the outreach that's occurred to date in terms of meetings with various boards and public outreach sessions?
Certainly happy to do so. In the current calendar year alone, there have been 3 separate public meetings, one back in June, and 2 here this fall. The most recent one hosted by the Board of Selectmen at the high school auditorium, as we know. And we have accepted public comment and provided that information with the assistance of Public Works to our consulting engineers for input and consideration in the project. Prior to that, and I would defer to Ray and/or Peter McConerty, prior to that, there have been discussions on the design of this project. It goes back at least 2 years, maybe a little bit longer than that, on a proposal that went to a joint meeting of the Board of Selectmen and the Planning Board, and a design consultant had made an initial proposal regarding improvements to the Main Street corridor that necessarily involved concepts like the roundabout, which then discussed consideration for traffic signalization and other related improvements. So that was part of a joint meeting. Again, I think it goes back 2 years anyway, and resulted in the current process in which we're involved at present. At that time, the board may recall, pursuant to that work in the joint meeting with the planning board, a green light was given to continue the work at that time, bringing us to the point where we are this year, which, as Mr. Jack has indicated, it's a very important threshold opportunity for us to move ahead and remain in the hunt and competitive for these very limited dollars that are available.
If I remember, that meeting was at the Herman Meeting Room at the library, and I'm fairly certain we had the Bikeways Committee not as a joint meeting, but they were also had representatives there and were part of the discussion.
They were in attendance as well, and as you note, Selectman Jones, we've had discussions with Bikeways representatives. There was also a Bikeways Committee meeting that I know that Deputy Public Works Director Peter McConerty attended, representing the town Public Works and town staff members, and was a significant part of that discussion as well, which has provided further input to the town and its consultants on the project.
And just further, we did hear take public comment about the issue in August at the listening session.
Correct, Sam?
I have just a question. Ray, to what extent does the water main design depend on the road layout, which the state may get involved in, but to what extent do those two designs have to be coupled together?
Believe it or not, one of the major benefits of, even though the projects are separate, but having them run not quite concurrently, was one of the larger components was the surveying. So we were able to do the surveying for two projects under one, so to speak, and that was an extensive amount of work that was done on that. The layout itself is not problematic with regard to the state. Palmer Ave up to Falmouth Heights Road is town, and then from Falmouth Heights Road out to the Mashpee line, of course, is state. But we had worked very well with them on the sewer line construction, especially on the 28 area with the state, and they're fully on board with the water main project. And of course, this is their road too that would be disrupted, so we would want to be able to try to come on the heels of that project in order to facilitate all of the improvements out there, which includes the road. Because for the water main project, as the main goes down, it's going to be confined to one lane. And then for each of the businesses and/or residents, there has to be a service connection, so that's a lateral trench that goes across. So what the project does is pave that one lane. It'll be a full-width paving of one lane, and then the trenches would be restored. Then for the remainder of the project, what we would want to have with the Main Street improvements would be the full-width mill and overlay, all right, which would take it up to 100%. And one thing that I just might add to Mr. Souzo's overview was on those two meetings with the Joint Planning Board and Selectmen. One was in 2015, and that was a draft of the report, and then the final report was presented, and I want to say it was March of 16. So, and I was here for that meeting as well. That's when we had the discussion of the roundabout.
Okay, and then bringing it to the motion that I just read that's before the board today, one of the major steps that's occurred during this public outreach and discussion of the proposal is that it's been broken up into 3 phases or 3 sections. 1 and 2 would be encompassed in our consideration of the motion today, which talks about from on Route 28 from Sandwich Road to Oxbow. And then the Phase 3, or the 3rd section, would be further.
That's Phase 3. That's Section 3.
Would be the last.
Yes.
Okay, so in terms of, why don't you just outline the phases here? So again, anyone who's just hearing this for the first time.
Section 1 is from Palmer Ave to Falmouth Heights Road.
Okay.
And that's all town-owned and controlled. There are actually very minimal improvements there necessarily due to the way the layout actually is. There's just not much room to do anything. Then the second section is where the state layout starts, which is Falmouth Heights Road to Friendly's, and that goes out to the school administration building. And that's a section by itself because it is overwhelmingly business as opposed to residential. And then the area from Sandwich Road, where the school administration building is, out to Oxbow, is about another mile, almost a mile and a half. And that's a mixed business and residential. So those are the respective sections. But probably the most critical at this point really is Section 1 and Section 2. We want to try to be able to minimize the business disruptions, be able to try to facilitate whatever we need to in order to smooth out all of the construction that would occur and all of the details of any of the changes that we make. But this would allow us, the town, and specifically Public Works, to be able to move forward with the things that work and take the time to be able to look, especially with the area east of Sandwich Road. I do believe that we will be able to facilitate some type of approvable alternative, and what that means for you is, I would say, acceptable and approvable. Acceptable to the those that live in the area, and approvable by the state. So I think we will be able to do both, and I think we would have the answers to that through the 25% design.
But this will be the approval for the entire project that you need to get started on design?
Yes, and I think that that's a major point that you make, in that this keeps the project together, in that we don't want to lose an opportunity here. If, for whatever reason, the town was not able to overcome the challenges of Sandwich Road to Oxbow, then it doesn't mean that we lose everything. So this keeps all of the options on the table.
Important point. Doug?
So it seems like we're just starting to discuss seriously about the concept of burying utilities.
Yes.
I know that's a lot of engineering. If we go ahead and start planning this 25% plan on the roadway now, will the engineering for the underground utilities always be trying to play catch up and be a challenge?
I won't say catch up. It's not as though we're going to go into a full engineering design on the utilities. That would be extremely expensive. And we're not in a position to do that because they're not our utilities. They belong to Eversource and the other respective utilities. So they would play a very heavy role. As a matter of fact, they would actually play the lead on design of any of the underground utilities. But what we will be proceeding with is giving the board all the information in the town, all the information that you need to determine whether you want to do that or not. So that will proceed at this time under this.
So are they at this time starting to work on those ideas?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Just so I understand what we would be approving, I certainly understand that the Section 3 is a potential alternative options approval. What level of detail are we now approving for Section 1 and 2? Because I guess we're not at the 25% for that, so are there certain detail, are we just approving in concept that we move forward and you'll be coming back to us for approval of the more specific details? And I guess to be very blunt, the roundabout, is that something we're approving right now, or are we just approving we're going to go forward and you'll come back to us and say, okay, now let's actually get down to brass tacks and talk about that roundabout?
Exactly what you said on the second part, which is that it will be coming back to the board for that final approval. Right now, we will work with the individual businesses, we will work with the stakeholders and abutters and what have you in order to be able to try to determine what's going to actually appear on a 25% design. So we're looking at a roundabout, we're looking at a traffic light at Dillingham, changing the configuration at Sandwich Road where it meets 28, and then a number of different curb cut type changes in order to facilitate a better traffic flow both in and out of the various merchants on along the whole corridor area. The actual traffic light at the fire station is obsolete, so it needs to be reconfigured, and that's probably the major improvement in this particular area. It may also result in requesting approval for a traffic light at Scranton Ave, where the exit's going to be for the rec center and the senior center. So all of those things, and if the board might recall, there was a discussion at that joint meeting when someone had wanted to consider restricting the left-hand turn opportunity, and that didn't play out so well. So, but yes.
In the perfect world, I understood you were saying that the money that's available from the state might not be available till 2024 or 2023, but there's a potential of moving faster on that, because if we're shovel-ready and other projects that have already been earmarked aren't, is there potential that the road project might really be able to be right on the heels of the water main project?
Yes, there is. I am familiar with the projects that are on that list right now.
Okay.
And I can't name them all specifically, but I do know that the total's in the $53 million range over that 5-year period. It's roughly $10 million a year. And those projects are on varying phases of development, and some are more important than others. So one of the things to try to remember here, the state also has a vested interest. This isn't just a local project. It's part of a state road. So it is in their vested interest to want to be able to move forward with it as well, because they're going to be one of the beneficiaries of it.
Okay, thank you.
Any other, Doug?
We had several comments about citizens at the outreach last couple of meetings, asking that we have committees for both sections of the road. And we've had other comments subsequently encouraging us to use the Selectmen's Committee, which is more cumbersome, but it's a more...
I was going to move to that next, just
Okay.
to make sure, I just want to be sure we're done with the motion in terms of the agenda item 5.
So I'd be happy to move to proceed with the design.
Well, I think it's part of 5, because the question I'm going to ask is, do we want to consider a committee for sections 1 and 2 as well prior to approval?
All right, let's just fast forward then. Mr. McConaty, if you could come up for a second, just a quick question. We're going to just kind of segue to the next section, and I want to just give some background on the issue before we start talking about committees. If you could just give us, with Mr. Jack, a sense of the way most design and construction goes. I know most recently, for example, we saw you here with respect to, there was a curb cut issue with a gentleman on Sandwich Road, for example. I'm looking to see on which there was no committee for. And so I'm just wondering what the general process is in Public Works, road construction, and working with individual properties, businesses, that kind of thing, just to lay the table for what's the average.
Well, in the past, we've always worked with, we put our projects together, our roadway projects together, and if it affects any property owners, or if we see that we're going to be cutting into property owners, we just work with them directly. This project's a little different. It's because it's the state, and we're looking for federal and state funding. We have to follow their public notifications. They do the public notifications, they do the 5-10% meetings, they do the 25% meetings, they do the 75% meetings. So it's a little different in that way. But it's exactly what Ray had said, is you would go through these meetings right here, they'd come back with the 25%. It would be approved through the state, how the state approves it, and then it would move forward to the 75%. But it's like a dual. It would be like a two-pronged approach on this. Would be going for the 25 through the 75%, but would also be going over to the MPO and to the TIP, putting those funds and plugging that into a fiscal year for construction.
So, really boots on the ground here. If, and I don't know the exact number, so for section 2, I didn't hear anyone from section 1, but from section 2, it seemed that there were, maybe 10, 12, whatever the number is, folks who actually live in section 2. How would Public Works interact with those folks in terms of what the design is going forward?
I think we've been, up to this point, we've been doing that with the comments coming in. They come through us and they go right up to to our traffic consultant. So that's how we would deal with it. We stay in the loop with it. It comes through Public Works and it goes to our traffic consultant, and we go back and forth that way. And that would be the same with the business owners around with the proposed roundabout area too. The friendlies in the other areas would be working with the business owners, with our traffic consultant.
because I'm just really trying to gauge what the average process is versus, you know, what we might need a committee for. In other words, does the average process address individual needs sufficiently? And so that's, I'm trying to get a baseline on that before we get to Mr. Brown's question in terms of this particular project, so the board can determine, do we need a committee only for section 3? Because is section 1 and 2 already being appropriately handled in the normal course of business of DPW? That's the question I'm trying to get more information on.
Yeah, I'll give you, for instance, so we just finished up a couple of years ago with the Davisville intersection and the Jones Road intersection, and that was the typical process. We did the 5-10%, and then that went into the 25%, and that's followed through, and it addressed all the comments from the businesses and from the neighbors. So where we are right now, it is addressed. That would be with sections 1 and sections 2, that would be how we would do the interactions, if there was no committee. If there was a committee, it would be different, but if there was no committee, the comments would come to us, they'd come to our consultant, and would work through it individually that way.
Okay, and back to Doug's question, then Megan?
So let me ask you a theoretical question. What if every single abutter to the area of the proposed roundabout all didn't want the roundabout? What effect would that have?
If they all did not want it, and they sent their comments in to us, that would have a big effect, because then we'd have to work through it. Why? Is it just you don't want it, or is there aesthetics, is there driveway issues, is there circulation issues? We'd have to look at all those, to try to work with each individual and each individual business owner or homeowner and say, what is it that you don't like? And so that's basically the process we do, but then there basically does become a time that you say, we have to keep this project moving forward, so you exhaust what you can do, and then after that, it basically becomes a decision, what are we gonna do?
Megan?
So, just because I know we're sort of morphing into the conversation about the second piece. You know, I know that there are some residential abutters to section 2, section 1 as well, but I mean really section 2.
Yep.
And we heard from some of them, and I think that they've sent some comments.
I think more of those abutters were put towards the Sandwich Road area.
Yes.
And that area
Right,
over.
right at the almost at the cutoff.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think obviously their positions are important, and that conversation is key. But just looking at the time that we have, and sort of thinking about maximizing the impact that we have around what is really sort of the most dramatic component, which is section 3, I guess I would, you know, sort of charge the DPW in doing what they're already doing, so it's not actually giving you a charge because you do it, but to be able to, they already can focus on those residential individuals that are in that section 2, because it's a small group, and you know, you'll hear from them, and I'm less worried about businesses because I think they have the chamber to help advocate for them. I think that they've had ongoing conversations with DPW, not only for this project, but obviously for the previous impact that the sewering had, and I know that that those conversations are ongoing. So I guess if we're at the point of discussion, I would prefer a selectmen's appointed committee for the section 3. It doesn't mean that they can't hear from people about section 2 and pass that on, but that section 3 really is sort of the crux of the challenge for us. And you know, just given that the window is, so we're in the end of November, if it's selectmen appointed, there's a process, so they're not maybe getting going until the end of December.
To advertise.
Yes, we have to advertise and all of that, so.
Yep.
I guess I'm confident that DPW, because the number for section 2 is small, and because those individuals can reach out to us, to the DPW, and it's not 300 people, it's maybe a dozen folks, you know, that's an easier piece to deal with, and then the businesses are gonna do what the businesses are, they're gonna speak to you, and they already have.
Yeah. What I can say is, and this is probably getting to more to your question, Sue, is what we've done in the past is if we do have comments that come up for any project that we do, and I think at least probably 3/4 of you, we've met on site, and actually I think one of you has been in attendance. We've met on site with the individuals, with the property owners, with the business owners, saying, what are you looking for? What can we do? What can't we do? A lot of them is, where's the layout? Where's the property line? And then you start from there. And we've been I'd say, close to 100% successful. Most of our projects all go through. So, and when you walk away, everybody's happy because everybody walked away with something from the table. And they feel like that what we do with our successes, they feel like they've been heard. So we were able to work with the.
That's exactly what I was trying to put forth, because the average person sitting at home and tuning in doesn't know how this works all the time. We've all heard it. We've heard a myriad of instances where individual questions or concerns have gotten, really immediate, thorough, and successful, addressing. And that's really what I wanted to kind of get some, definite background and specific, examples, which you've done. So I think that that's important for everyone to know, as familiar as the board is with it. Doug?
I guess my suggestion is a little bit out of the box, and that is to follow Jane Perry's suggestion. What if we actually went back to having a transportation committee, and their first charge was to look at this part of the project, but it actually were a wider viewing committee? It is not just for this project, but it is doing what she has asked, because I think it's really something we do need to look at. And they could even look at Section 2, they could look at Section 3, but it could be a bigger committee, or not say number of numbers, but a bigger scope committee, with this as being the first charge.
I agree we need a transportation committee, and I certainly think this board should move forward at a future agenda on that item. We have concerns with Main Street, parking, crowding, traffic, all over town, and I think that's really the essence of a transportation committee. But I think there's been such an outcry from citizens, voters, property owners, business people for an input committee specifically on this project that would have such a short time to do its work, that I really want to hone in on that specific committee. And we also, we've gotten opinions from town council about the way that we can move forward with a selectmen's committee that could have folks who are abutters on the committee. So I think we're far enough up that path where I don't really, I definitely agree with you on the importance of a transportation committee. I think it's almost long overdue to get back to that, and I really appreciate Jane's suggestion on that. A former member of CCRTA, Sam, I'm sure will have something to say when we get to that. He's the current CCRTA member. But I think right now we need to just move forward with the committee that we've been asked to form on this road. And I agree with Selectman Braga that it should be a selectmen's committee. Doug?
Well, so back to the question I had was, I agree also about the Selectmen's Committee for Section 3. I've already concluded that. My question is, should there be a town manager's ad hoc committee for Sections 1 and 2? That was the question I was.
I'm satisfied with the response of DPW on 1 and 2. I mean, we'll be getting consistent feedback on those issues, and I'm concerned about diluting, because there's a short time to get started for this Section 3 Selectmen's Committee. Ms. Braga?
Yeah, just to the, I mean, I get where, I get Doug's concern. I mean, Section 1 and Section 2 are really important, and we heard a lot of concern, particularly about the roundabout and some of the other parts. But I think I do think people will be able to kind of address those, and that the DPW can kind of focus in on that. I really think where we want to call upon sort of the community is to focus in on that particular Section 3, so that we can get, kind of the best review, the best input. I mean, that if we put a committee together, we're going to charge them with taking public input. They're going to have a lot to do in a small time period. And I just feel like if we have multiple committees kind of trying to do the same thing, it's maybe a little bit confusing, and maybe does kind of dilute the focus, which is primarily on Section 3. Not that the other ones don't have some merit.
If we had a town manager's committee on Section 1 and 2, we would have to publicize it and say, if you want to be on this committee, let Mr. Suso know, or let Mr. McCarty know. Alternatively, we could say, if you want to make comments on Section 1 and 2, let Mr. Suso know and let Mr. McCarty know, and we're doing the exact same appeal, and they can do that without restriction. It's not a committee where there's conflict of interest. We can say, if you have concerns, Mr. Corners asked you to let him know so they can respond to it, and we can just get that appeal out there saying, on these two sections, tell us what you need, tell us what's going on.
That's a great point.
And then move forward that way, which can be, in some ways, an ad hoc committee, because Mr. Suso will take the responses and move forward with the DPW with them.
And just like
Make a
everything
copy
else,
of this.
when it comes to selectmen, we forward those along anyway,
Right.
so that's a good point, Ms. Braga?
But just to one other point, if we can sort of, as you're taking those comments, get a sense from you, maybe as we're getting closer to that 25, before the 25%, spring date, sort of what are the comments that, because we'll see some of them, some will go right to you, but what are the comments say about the issue that Doug is raising around the roundabout? So we can have a sense of, and the community can have a sense of, we're getting a lot of pushback about the roundabout, or we've only heard from 2 abutters about the roundabout, or what, we're focusing on that part, but other parts of it as well, any of the proposed, cut-ins and things that you're gonna do, so that maybe, halfway to that point, we can get a sense of what the community.
The town manager's report
Right.
can focus on that if the town manager wouldn't mind.
Happy to proceed however the board would choose.
Great.
Certainly.
Is someone ready to make a motion?
Can I ask one last question?
Sure.
So, given that doesn't seem to be much support for that idea, can I just ask you one more question about the section 2? It seems to me, driving down it, it's pretty wide and maybe wide enough to work with what we have and just focus on curb cuts and safety issues. Is that correct? What general changes can the public expect? I know you haven't designed it yet, but what's your concept of that stretch?
That's correct. The state road layout is generally sufficient through there. So I don't see any need to have to get into anything that's going to be significant as far as any widening.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Now I'm ready.
No, I think we just had some.
We're
I don't
gonna
know if we-
take a motion in a second, and then I'm gonna look for a discussion on that.
So the motion I'm gonna have is that I would move that we have a selectmen-appointed committee to review the Section 3 portion of this particular project, which would run from Sandwich Road to Oxbow Road.
In your motion, do you want to create the makeup of it, or are we just gonna vote to have that committee and then have another motion to determine size, appointedness?
Well, I'll be pushy, and I'll say that how about a 9-member committee?
And how many abutters, given the
issues that we have around abutters.
process, right?
So I think we got our guidance from our town council that, we can look to do the waiver of some of the abutters, but probably not an entirety of a committee.
Mhm.
Is that the?
So you say.
I don't think we should put a number of abutters
I
on the
don't, I
committee.
think we're just pick the number, and then whomever comes before us, we individually interview them.
I would
and then
think
we're
of that,
gonna-
I would think of that 9, one of them might be someone from the planning, I think we could have some, not 9 members at large, but I think there could be 2 or 3 that are coming from other committees, and then maybe 6 members at large.
Okay, so a member from planning board, member from bikeways,
Disabilities?
disability, commission on disability, and then 6 members at large? Does that make sense to people?
What I worry about is that somehow or other the larger community needs get completely overtaken by the conflict of interest issue, which is the interest of the butters. And I think at some point, there has to be a question, how much do the needs of the community have to be completely, subverted to the needs of the abutters? And
Well,
that's
let's
the
look at-
dynamic that's here, and I'm
It's
worried
not a
that.
subversion, this is open to the entire town. And when we do the appointments, I think your consideration can come up with, well, we may not want, what's left, 6 at-large members all living on 28, because what if some, for whatever reason, do ultimately get excluded? I also know that Rep. Vieira would like I forget what to call it, but sort of an, thank you, sort of an ex officio position on the committee, in which case would that, if the board thinks that's a good idea, would that be in addition to the 9?
Yeah, I think he would be a non-voting member of
Exactly.
the committee.
So that would be 10.
Okay.
And
Oh, sorry, I was just gonna say the reason, just, you know, you could have a 30-person. It gets too cumbersome.
Right.
When it's appointed, you need to have a quorum.
Right.
I mean, it just becomes too big. You have to have something that's functioning. 9 allows us to, like, you know, to hear some voices, to hear some diversity of thoughts and ideas about how to address it. But it's not so big that, you know, we had this problem with Commission on Disabilities. It had 15 members. We couldn't meet and have a quorum for almost a year, however long it was, because we couldn't fill everybody and people weren't always available. So I think 9 is a workable number for the time frame that we have.
Do we need to describe what we're looking for in those other 6?
Are we looking for a
That'd be
business
vague, that would be a vague
member?
description, but
Someone from business, or?
I
At
just,
least 2 of the concerned abutters, I think
Oh,
appropriate.
absolutely.
I guess I would not tie our hands to saying numbers, because what if we only have one concerned abutter apply? What if we have no one from the business that apply? I mean, so I'd say we're looking for people with a diverse interest in this, including potentially abutters, businessmen, but I just
Yeah, I
wouldn't
think,
put
I
any
like the
numbers on-
language,
the
potential,
appointment.
I think we just say,
Yeah.
we're looking for, you know, aside from Commission on Disability Planning and Bikeways, we're looking for 6 other individuals who have, interest and knowledge in, you know, about this area. People from the business community, abutters, whatever, you know, however we decide to.
One of the things I would hope we're looking at is the overall traffic patterns as well.
That's the reason I would like the idea of making this, go ahead and having them start looking at the bigger picture and having a traffic
Maybe they'll
advisory.
morph into it, they'll get so much experience.
I
I
thought
wanna,
we-
I wanna
but
second,
it-
I wanna second the motion so that we can put it properly on the floor. I think we have the makeup that Ms. Braga
Well, actually, I'm sorry, I
You
don't mean
wanna
to interrupt you, but
change
what
your
about
motion?
traffic advisory? I mean, should they be,
We don't have one.
Yeah, and we've already got,
we've got enough.
you know, we can consult with police, we can consult with DPW. I
Okay.
think that the concept of.
Okay.
you know-
They'll have to make their communications with whomever they make their communications with.
Exactly. And so is there any other discussion by the board before I ask the folks that are here? Is there anyone, I want to limit it to about 2 minutes a person. Mark, do you want to start?
Madam Chair, can I just clarify?
Sure.
We do technically have a traffic advisory group, but it's mostly an internal group that looks
That's
at,
what I was, so I guess they'll just
They
have
can
a
be
conversation
Fairly-
with them.
yeah,
Okay,
fairly
that's
narrow issue,
fine.
but it's not the transportation advisory concept that's been talked about, so just
Correct.
wanted to acknowledge that.
Thank you. Mark?
Mark Finner in Precinct 6. First, I'd like to suggest in the 1 and 2 Selectmen's group that you do some kind of a survey like the charter review is, and then quantify it so the public can have an input and we can know what it is. And then secondly, we were told initially by Mr. Jack that there's a potential for $10 million. And then he went on to say that's $10 million a year for the whole entire Cape, which, you know, if you divide it up by the 15 towns, that's only $666,000 potentially per year. So that $10 million figure seems to be, I'm not gonna say pie in the sky, but can, I get a little.
It's not allocated through all the towns. It's a competitive process that's reviewed by a particular board who reviews only these types of projects.
But still, at $10 million for the entire Cape, the chance of us getting $10 million is pretty slim, isn't it?
Well, there aren't a lot of $10 million projects all going on at the same time, so it rotates year by year.
And we're the second largest municipality.
Again, if there's 15 towns and there's $10 million a year, to say we might potentially get $10 million is kind of a stretch, isn't it?
I would say that, I mean, we don't have the money yet, but I think that the information that we have and the research that's been done, not just by Mr. Jack, but by our state reps as well, for the information that they have, we have a good chance. Obviously, it's not in your pocket until it's in your pocket, but part of the priority of getting this project further developed is that list of projects that are in competition, if you're not on the way to being, 100% ready to go, you just drop down in the priorities, the way that I understand the process. So
True.
we don't have it all, but it's
I'll believe
it's
it when I
possible.
see it.
Any other questions, comments? Please.
Good, I like
Good
that.
recovery.
Yeah, that was,
Nice recovery.
that was great.
I must chip often. Joe LeMay, Precinct 9.
We talk about abutters, and that's easy to identify. But on a project like this, just about everybody in town is not officially an abutter, but is close to being an abutter. You're gonna use my tax money to build a road that I have to drive on. And so I think that that concept needs to be incorporated into this committee. Also, a single point of contact for the public. If you have one committee that is doing section 1, another committee doing section 3, well, to someone out, who reads something in the Falmouth Enterprise and wants to contact somebody, they should have one committee. So it should be one committee. The emphasis will probably be on section 3. But if there's something in section 2 that someone realizes, they should still contact this same committee.
And also the selectmen.
Yeah, selectmen, I'm sure you get it all the time. But, so that one committee for the whole thing, but as Mr. Jack pointed out, section 1 is so constrained already that the options are near zero. And then, section 3 is unconstrained or constrained depending who you listen to. So there's lots of options. But I think one committee, and 9 sounds good to me. It's tough to make a quorum with 9, but I think on a topic like this, people will show up. And no limits. If all abutters apply and nobody else, that's what you'll have. I should hope that, I know I'm not an abutter, but my precinct members who are abutters have called me. I'm their town meeting member, they know me, and they were all on the phone. They stopped me at Walmart and tell me what they think. So, that kind of information from everybody would be important to collect.
And how'd you get to Walmart?
What?
How'd you get to Walmart? On that road?
That's right.
I rode my bike.
All right.
Brave.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, seeing none. Any other discussion from the members of the board?
Just the fact that regardless of who ends up on the board, the fact that there'll be open and posted meetings with minutes and public comment always taken, I think everyone will have a say in this process.
Should we put a deadline on applications and appointing?
I think we should, and I'd also, town council is still here. Frank, is there any other requirement the board should consider in terms of putting this committee together? And then, yeah, we should definitely consider a deadline.
And do we have a deadline?
I'm not sure that there is. Under the Home Rule Charter, you have the authority to create ad hoc committees. This is certainly an ad hoc committee, and you give them a purpose. You set the limits of their authority and the limits of their existence. The one thing you may want to determine is when you want their final report back. I understand there's some kind of time constraint here. But I was kind of making some notes in the event you did ask a question, and you covered most everything, really.
Mr. Jack, what would be your advice on the, when we would want the committee's report?
I think that the issues are clearly identified, and so it's not as though the residents in the area are unaware. They're very aware. So then the only question becomes presenting what any viable alternatives may be and if anything's going to be acceptable. That does not take that long. There's only so many options if we don't widen the road in that area. So I would say that if you were going to formulate the committee before the end of the year, meaning they'll probably be constituted, I would presume, late December, as you might have mentioned earlier, then January, February, March, April, 4-month time period. That puts us in a time frame of 25%, coming up on the 25%, and that would be an
So maybe
appropriate
the
time
first
frame.
week in April, the second week being school vacation, or?
Yeah, that
And
would
they're
be fine.
charged to investigate the potential alternative options for section 3 of this
Yes.
project.
Yes.
Prior to town meeting?
Yeah, that all makes sense.
And do we set the form of, we do set the form of their, so if we're asking for a written response. I mean, we set the form of what they're
The
presenting.
recommendation
The
would be.
recommendation would be, right?
Yes.
I got another question about the charge of the committee. As the process goes along, will the committee have any comment on sections 1 and 2, even though it's not we don't want to hold up a time schedule, but will they be free to comment on other areas, or will they focus only on 3?
I think they need to focus on that charge. I certainly think if they're contacted on those issues, they can you know, will have more immediate and direct access with DPW. They'll be more savvy and experienced about how to, you know, help people through the system. A lot of times, folks don't know who to contact or how to approach. They're just not comfortable with the, you know, the means. So I think the committee can be helpful in that regard, but I think the charge has to be focused on the Section 3 so that they can have time to delve into all of those issues.
But I think that also, those folks can talk to us on that Section 2, where there seems to be potentially some issues that people want to be, want us to hear about. And so I think we can be their spokesman as well, when you can, I mean.
Okay.
There's your point of contact, no.
That'll teach you to ask
Yeah,
questions.
I just think it would be nice, we really want to make sure that for Section 3, in, you know, come this date in April, folks feel like they, you know, they've had conversations, they've been heard, they may not like the final result because the committee is gonna put something together and make a recommendation of maybe one particular option or one or two, but they will have had ample time to sort of continue to have that conversation. And, you know, I think if we broaden it too much, it's just gonna go, you know, it just doesn't focus on the area that we've heard the most concern about.
And it's, you know, the Board of Selectmen is not abdicating any decisions on that section. It's just really getting, by appointing a committee, getting the best, most detailed, most worked upon recommendations for that section. So, you know, we understand there may be disagreements, but it really is gonna expedite and assist in our determination going forward. And it's gonna give everyone, I think, more opportunities to really have detailed opinions about particular things that aren't just looked at, you know, from a, you know, high-level perspective. It will literally be looked at on the ground level. Did you have a thought, Doug, in terms of some publication deadlines or dates by which we might want to get applications in?
I didn't.
Town manager, I thought you mentioned dates.
I have some thoughts, Madam Chair,
Please.
if you care to. One of our constraints, we do need to advertise this, I think as Frank Duffy's confirmed. I'm not certain what the deadline is on this holiday week to get an advertisement in the enterprise. We can check on that with Peter and Diane first thing tomorrow. But Friday would be the first time you'd be able to advertise it in the enterprise. And normally you want to give, I think, people at least 2 weeks. Your last meeting in December, if you are to have that as a target for interviewing, is Monday, December 17th. So perhaps you might want to consider a deadline for responding Wednesday, December 12th, to give us a little bit of time to get these things in. It would be on the board's tentative agenda for your last meeting in the month, which is going to be normally it's a very heavy and crowded meeting anyway. So that's, you know, just a reality we have with the calendar. And then if you, you know, make your determinations on that same night, that would allow us to get started, I think, in January, because that might be the best case scenario.
I guess I'm feeling a little bit stretched to interview and appoint the same night.
Yeah, it'd be tough.
I know the week before, I think we have a joint meeting with the school committee. Is there any way we could somehow do interviews
Like before.
either before, you know, separate from them? And I don't think our joint meeting with the school committee will be a 3-hour meeting. It might be an hour and then break off to another space to have, I'm not sure whether the school committee's coming here or not.
Not sure about
Is
that
that the
either.
10th?
Yeah.
I like that idea, however we structure it. I mean, it's somewhat similar to what we just did, whatever that was, 2 weeks ago, to have that meeting at 5, to give time, you know, for the list, the hearing more comment about this, so to use that December 10th date in some way.
What would be your deadline to receive applications in less than 2 weeks?
The 5th or 6th?
It would be about 7 working days, which is fine, whatever the board wants.
We've already got enough people sending us emails saying they want to be on this committee, so.
Well, the only thing you want to be careful of is that there may be somebody out there who said, I would have been interested, but I didn't get notified.
Right, okay, that's
I'm just
fair.
sharing that with the board, but
In addition to the publication in the enterprise, can we also send a blast email to precinct members as well as the village associations?
certainly.
And just with a bold notice, this is a, a rapid deadline, and, this is the same issue selectmen have been publishing, for weeks, but that this is an additional application that is necessary for this particular process.
What deadline would the board be setting? It wouldn't be the 7th, which is just the Friday before.
It just doesn't give the office turnaround to get to the 10th, so I either say the 5th or the 6th.
Okay. Ideally, maybe the 5th to give us a little bit of breathing room.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the only reason I raised that, Madam Chair, members of the board, is that I've noticed that recently we've gotten a couple names in that, in spite of all of the public information meetings we've had a couple people that are from other areas have reached out and made some comments, so
I think
we may
that's
get more from that group.
That's another good point. So all of the emails that have been collected, which were to solicit comments, we can also copy those folks on the fact that, now is your opportunity to put in an application for the committee. And I think if we go to all those extraordinary efforts, we'll be able to meet this expedited deadline.
I mean, ultimately, we're really only looking for 6 members, because we've already, we're looking for someone from
Bikeways,
commission,
planning.
bikeways, and planning, and that's easy to reach out, have somebody from those committees that's sort of slightly situated in a different way than the other 6 members. I think we have more than enough. There's more than 6 people who have expressed some interest, and if we get the applications in, it gives us time to look at it. It also gives that one other date of the 17th, if by chance someone cannot come on that December 10th date. I mean, we always have 1 or
Exactly.
2 people who can't come.
Right.
It gives that 17th if we have to interview 1 or 2 additional people.
So let's not forget to copy planning, bikeways, and who was the?
Commission on Disabilities.
Commission on Disability.
Well, that you're asking them to designate one of their
Yes,
members
right.
to participate.
Right.
If there is a volunteer, we can't order them, right?
Why not?
I don't know.
Sam,
They'll volunteer.
I think it's gonna be important to mention that they're gonna have to be meeting throughout the winter. You can't take a winter vacation and not be available, or you're not gonna be representing, the group that you are supposedly representing. So
Yeah.
this is gonna take a commitment from whoever it is that signs up to this to be present through the winter months.
Right.
Good point. We can't have somebody who's a
Ski bum.
Snowbird.
snowbird.
So,
It's just so we alert
vote
people.
on that?
We just have to vote it.
Thank you.
Talked a lot about it.
I
We
was
have to-
gonna
we actually
say-
have to vote.
I'm kind of, all
I
right.
think you need a second, Madam Chair. I don't know if the motion was ever
I'll
seconded.
second.
Thank you, Sam.
Okay.
All those in favor?
Aye. With all of that.
Great.
So we hand all of that.
Wait, what did we just vote on?
Okay.
And then
We also need the,
back to 5,
to
right?
look at 5, the
Madam Chair,
motion.
could I raise one
Please.
other issue? Pardon me.
Yeah?
So the interviews would be on the 10th, as early as the 10th, carried over to the 17th as need be. Your decisions will be made on the 17th.
Correct.
Selections.
Yep.
And I just wanted to confirm that as well. And also, you have that other process, if you name a butters, as town council has mentioned, we'll have to define the process you'll need to follow on that conflict of interest issue. So we'll need to remember that. That would also presumably need to be handled on the 17th.
And actually, I'd prefer it be done earlier so that folks who were applying knew what process they may need to go through. In other words, if you're on a butter and you want to be on this committee, it would be ideal if you knew what you would have to do. In other words, in layman's terms, do you have to make a specific application to the selectmen? Is it entirely within the selectmen's hands? What information do selectmen need to make this application?
Yes, the conflict of interest law prohibits a municipal employee from participating in a particular matter in which they have a personal financial interest. Now, under the law, a person appointed to a committee by the selectmen or a selectmen's committee is considered a municipal employee. So your first step would be to designate them as special municipal employees as opposed to regular municipal employees, because the conflict of interest law applies less strictly to special municipal employees. And special municipal employees are people who work part-time, less than 16 hours a week, or don't get paid at all. Now,
And we can appoint them all, that is not individual. We can appoint the entire committee as special.
Yes, in fact, you have to, you must.
Okay.
Everybody on one committee has to be designated the same. You can't have a mix of special and regulars.
Do you have to wait to do it until after they're appointed?
Yes, you typically do.
Okay.
And now, once the person, now, because an abutter has a personal financial interest in the subject matter of the committee, that is, whatever happens on that road may affect the value of their property. And I checked with the State Ethics Commission on this, and they affirmed my opinion that yes, they would have a conflict of interest. So an abutter must then apply to you for an exemption. Now, there's an application form. It's online. The State Ethics Commission's online, or we have it in our office and we can give it to you. You fill out that application form, you submit it to the Board of Selectmen, and then at an open meeting, you have to go over the reasons with them, and then you may vote the exemption. But you must vote the exemption for each individual. You cannot vote a blanket exemption for the group.
All right, so the process will be, for Diane to have paper application, should people come in.
Yeah.
There'll be a little box that says, are you in a butter? If
Yeah.
you are, you then get the second packet, which
Right.
explains exactly what you've just
Yes, and
talked
we
about.
can make sure that she has the right
And so folks
stuff.
will know that if they are appointed, at that appointment, we will then go forward with the second process.
You can do that.
So they
It's-
can start the ground running.
It's not a hearing that has to be noticed, so you can
Right.
do it at any time.
Thank
But
you.
yes, we can make sure they have all of that.
Okay, great, and it'll also be indicated online that they, you know, if you are in a butter, you've got to also download the second application,
Right,
something
and you
along
also
those.
have to have on that agenda for that night to vote them as special municipal employees.
Okay,
So, Madam Chair, to clarify then, not only would they be designated as special municipal employees and appointed the night of December 17th, but you're asking that the proper form be submitted so that the board, if you have a conflict with an abutter, could make your determination after speaking with them the same night and essentially wrap everything up with a bow on Monday, December 17th.
that's what I'm looking at, so that when folks come
Got it.
before the board to go through the interview process, they know right then and there what's required of
So
them.
they'd have to be interviewed twice.
Right.
They have to be interviewed on the 10th, potentially be appointed.
Right.
And the 17th, for us then to consider whether we're going to exempt them or not.
Correct.
If they're in a
We can-
butter, right.
Peter?
We cannot be required to exempt them. And the expectation is it actually is a case-by-case basis in which we determine whether they could be appointed to this board, and we don't feel we can exempt them.
Well, no, they wouldn't be appointed then,
We can't-
because
they-
then they can't be on the committee.
But that, we can't automatically do that. We appoint
No,
them.
we do that in our heads while we're deciding whether to have them on the board. That's because we cannot appoint someone who has this conflict.
Now, you can
Frank,
appoint them,
which
you-
way does it go?
No, you can appoint them. It really has to be done pretty much at the same time.
That's my point.
Because you can appoint them, but you have to immediately exempt them. But that's a separate process. It's a separate vote. And the exemption is based upon an application.
Right.
And
So-
what's in that application is what how you determine whether to exempt.
And we're gonna do it all at once to make it easier for everyone, so we don't have someone on a committee that's not going to be exempted and therefore use up a committee space unnecessarily. Peter, did you have a thought? And then Megan?
I was just, it's sort of the same thought. I guess my thinking was if we are able to get all of the applicants to submit, along with their application, a disclosure form, I guess I don't see why we would have to have two separate interviews. So the interview would be, tell us about your approach and how you feel about, your particular interest might affect your ability to deliberate and to act in the best interest in the community. And as Chairman Moran suggested, take it all in at once to say, okay, given the full scope of the situation, can this person serve? And can we accept that they will be able to vote on their disclosure because we're confident that they can act in the best interest of the community?
Megan?
Right, I mean, that's how I envision it. So you have your list of 20 people, and there's an A after each person who has self-identified as an abutter. And so when they come up, we interview them and we say, we can see you're in a butter. Can you tell us what this conflict, explain where you live? Can you have that conversation that we're supposed to have? And that way, when we are appointing, we've already got that information rather than appoint and then hear about their conflict, because then it's just, then we're everyone's gonna be here for 3 hours if we say, okay, we can't agree that, you know, you're excluded, even though we've already appointed you. So I guess I'd like to see it, as long as Frank says that that's okay to.
You know, it's never been done before,
Oh, okay.
that, in my memory, and certainly not in this town. But, you know, on the conflict of interest disclosure form, the purpose is to convince you folks as the proper authority that that person, despite the conflict of interest, can best serve the interests of the community.
But when is that, so I guess what we're asking is, can that be disclosed?
Yeah.
Prior to us appointing them? So
Yes,
that we can.
I think it can actually. There's, although it's distinct and discrete, it's all part of the same process.
Thank you. And just so folks know why we're going through all this, this has been a bit of a hurdle that we've been looking at in order to have the Selectmen's Committee. So we've worked very hard on making sure the mechanics are put together in a way that not only has good legal effect, but that makes sense and is not too cumbersome for anyone who wants to apply.
And to give an opportunity, obviously, the majority of folks we've heard from about Section 3 have been abutters, and technically, abutters can't be on this committee. So we've really, that's why we've asked town council, and we've tried to work through ways to at least allow those applications to come before the board and be viewed on an individual basis, to see if there are any abutters that can be on, you know, appointed to this committee for whom we waive that conflict. So that's the whole reason why it sounds more complicated than just putting a whole bunch of people on a committee and going forward.
And the law does provide for the waiver, so it's okay to do that.
Thanks for taking your coat off again and getting back into this.
I would move that we proceed with the design on the Main Street corridor project from Palmer Ave to Sandwich Road and investigate potential alternative options along Route 28 from Sandwich Road to Oxbow Road.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Great. So thank goodness we've got the license renewals all done. Great
We're done.
idea. Town managers report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Briefly, my thanks to members of the board for your assistance, participation, and support during the recently completed November town meeting, which, as we know, ended successfully this past Thursday evening. And as you know, beginning with the multiple precinct meetings a week to 10 days earlier, this has indeed been a whirlwind time with much challenging activity, and I was pleased to attend multiple precinct meetings, as well as my colleague Peter and Finance Director Jennifer Petit. As a reminder, the board's next business meeting will be Monday, December 3rd, and also Town Hall and Town Administrative Offices will be closed this Thursday, November 22nd, Thanksgiving, and Friday, November 23rd for the Thanksgiving holiday period. And happy Thanksgiving to all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Same to you.
Johnson-Stott.
Happy Thanksgiving.
I move we adjourn.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye. We have to sign.
Welcome to the Falmouth Chamber of Commerce. The Falmouth Chamber is dedicated to working on behalf of our members to make Falmouth a better place to live, work, and conduct business. We are committed to developing the economic, cultural, educational, and civic interests of our community and welcome the support from all organizations to achieve our combined goals. Whether you call Falmouth home, are a summer resident, or a visitor, we hope you take advantage of all that the Chamber has to offer.